We're going to get started. So just again, want to welcome everyone to the third night of our budget deliberations. So we're going to start this evening, go right to deputations, and we just have one tonight. So I'll call Ryan Jackson forward to the microphone for a 5-minute deputation.
Sorry, I got to read this off my computer. I literally just wrote this about 2 hours ago. So, good evening, everybody. When I first seen administration bring a 4.99% increase, my first thought was, no way that's going to happen. I knew we were in for some cuts, sacrifices, and tough decisions, and it's not anybody's fault here that we're in this position. Doug Ford and his Conservatives certainly didn't make this easier for you. Shame on them for passing the buck, downloading costs, and not only that, but leaving you guessing what's going to happen down the road. Well, that being said, I'm here tonight because I was watching the budget live stream and seeing Doug Solomon lead the way in cuts, $500,000 from the Capitol, which I thought was a great start. As the numbers began to drop, I watched the committee chip away and use creative ways to bring the tax increase down. Currently sitting at a respectable number, in my opinion. No doubt tonight you will continue to do just that. I am here to ask you to reconsider what I think is a mistake made. Cutting the Child Care Expansion Fund, the reason for cutting it I don't think is justified. I believe it has an impact of just 0.27%. When asked if administration could make it work out without the 20% municipal funding, the person answering seemed a little uneasy but suggested they could manage in the short term. This, I'm sure, had an impact on some budget members' decisions to vote in favor of the cut. Here's the thing. We heard on day one a deputation about priorities. Childcare should be a priority. During the election, we heard a lot about youth leaving Chatham-Kent and looking for ways to make them want to stay. We have about 900 people on the waiting list as it is for childcare. That's 900 too many. Now we want to cut $400,000 for what would it be intended to be used to expand, promote, and grow our childcare spaces. Young families deserve better. To me, this cut from the Budget Committee says young families are not a priority. I also want you to think about how easy it is to fall behind when things are not fully or properly funded. Sure, $400,000 will save us 0.27% today. How much is it going to cost us tomorrow? If next year our friendly Conservative Party decided to claw back funding because we do not view it as a priority, how much will it cost us then? I will give you my final thoughts. I completely think cutting childcare is a big mistake, and the risk or gamble is not worth the reward. Given all the information we have, I do believe there can be a compromise to be had. By maintaining a 10% municipal funding level of $200,000, you will achieve Council's goal of lowering our tax increase. At the same time, you'll put yourself in a position of saying childcare is a priority in our community. Most importantly, we are also preparing for the future in a responsible way. If next year the friendly Conservatives say in order to receive maximum funding, you need to put your share of 20% in, instead of considering $400,000 increase to the budget next year, you're already halfway there. So please consider making a motion to have another discussion on this topic amongst you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so we'll start into the agenda for the night. Starting out, before we get back into the tabs, we have some information from administration.
So I just wanted to demonstrate where we're at. I don't want to say that this is a huge alarm bell or warning going off, but I just wanted to make you aware of where we're at with some of our one-time funding, because this is a unique year. We have our $700,000 from public health mitigation funding that we'll have for this budget. In general revenues, we have about $1 million of interest one-time revenues, and why that's one-time is because we've been saving up for several major projects, including the 3rd Street Bridge, the $18.5 million that's been put aside for the arena, and there's just a long list of other capital projects that are upcoming in the next year. Thomas Kelly at a council meeting not too long ago showed there's a surge of rural bridges that are all coming due at the same time in the next 5 years. So that money's there's some money in reserves now that's going to be quickly spent. So we don't want to put the interest that we're getting on that temporary funds into the base budget, but we bring it into the budget otherwise. Last night's decision to defer more of that underground infrastructure storm sewer funding to the next two years in 3 and 4 will add 125,000 more. And there's numerous other one-time expenses and revenues that soak up 275,000. So overall, there's about 1% base deficit already that will start next year's budget with. And then there's the additional 585,000 that's been set aside to fund one-time items. If we don't come up with one-time items that we're going to look after at and just put it against the taxes, we'll be at a 1.38% deficit the day after we pass this budget. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of it. Like I say, it's not I don't have large alarm bells. It's not that big of a worry, but it's just I need to make sure that you're aware that that's what our starting point will be before we start into anything next year. Thanks.
And just for some clarity, so yesterday with the Gateway Casino related motions, we applied the 200,000 increase in base. So we have this 585 on the side that was said maybe we can use it for supplementary budget items. So the result is there's not enough, or we've already used a lot of supplementary funding sources to fund those one-time sup items, right?
Yeah, it's just an extraordinary year that with that 585 coming out of the reserve fund towards taxes plus the one-time 700,000 from the province. There's close to 1% extra than that. We usually do have this case a little bit each year, about 500,000-600,000, but so about 0.3, 0.4%, and it was in this budget as well. But this is just skyrocketing another percent this year.
So if that 585 is not applied to the tax rate, if we used it for something else, what would that starting point be next year?
Yeah, so that added an extra 0.38%. So we'll still be at 1 because of that provincial issue plus the interest, but it would lower it from the 1.38 to the 1%.
Councillor Sakachi?
A quick question to you, Mr. Quinton. So how I'm understanding this, it would be more beneficial for us to ensure that capital money, that money was there, is spent in this budget then. Is that your best estimate? Preferably.
So it is at the will of council.
Correct.
If the will is to get to a lower percentage this year, I just letting you know that it'll come back to hit you next year.
So we did utilize the word a few times yesterday, punting something over to the next year. So basically this, if we didn't utilize this 585,000 this year, it would be just punting it over to next year where we're responsible to recover that, is correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'd like to put a motion forward then as well. I'd like to make a motion to fund the number 14 of the capital budget for cemetery road improvements for 300,000, a one-time from the 585,000 casino revenue, as well as 200,000 for a one-time pilot program that can be the administration could roll out, and we could measure the effectiveness after 1 year out of the 585,000.
That was the sandbag program, right?
Correct. Sorry.
Skip.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Do you have a second? Councillor Finn? Councillor Wright?
Thank you. I would also like to add in line 171, the pedestrian crosswalk for Ridgetown in that too. Friendly amendment.
Is that a friendly amendment, Councillor Scotchy?
That would put us to 560 of the 5. Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's a friendly amendment. Questions on this? Questions, comments on this motion? Yep. Yeah, we'll get it up there. You can ask a question before it goes up if you want to. When we'll divide it, we can divide it into three, Councillor Solomon. Councillor Pinstone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, I don't know where Gord went to, there he is. These numbers up here, are they just speculation, or the 700's in our budget right now, right? And that, are you speculating that if they don't give it to us? Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So the 700,000, we have verbal confirmation from the ministry that we're receiving that. It's one-time funding for the 2020 budget. So what that does is it moves off $700,000 that we'll have to make up next year. Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Harrigan?
I apologize if this doesn't come out succinctly because I'm trying to formulate the question in my mind regarding the capital, so the allocation towards capital. So is the implication to the capital budget if this passes, I believe you said $300,000 would be allocated towards capital, towards those bottom items, which one of them is cemetery roads. Does that put that $300,000 back in the capital budget forever? Or is that just this year? And it relates to a bit of a confusion that I had from yesterday. Like yesterday, did we cut our capital budget by 500-ish thousand forever until we put 500,000 more in it, or is that just a one-time thing? And next year we'll see a capital budget that has the 500,000. So, two-part.
So I'll answer the second part first. We asked to increase the capital budget in base by $517,000, and that was cut. But the direction was to go do those drainage mitigation fund items and not do the cemetery and the records management item, and there's still $17,000 left to cut somewhere. This motion is to take one-time money and take $300,000 and do those cemetery roads, but it's not adding to the base. It's one time. We still have that. We still have cut that 517 out of the base budget.
Right. So said differently, if our capital budget originally was X, it was proposed to be X plus 517 to address the disaster management adaptation fund.
In base.
In base. Then we removed from base 517 from X. So we had a capital budget of bracket X minus 17, plus we said we would fund the disaster mitigation. So we took from capital to pay disaster mitigation. Now, with this motion, we are putting $300,000 back in capital, so still a net reduction of our capital by $200,000 once. So next year, we still have to address the fact that if we separate disaster from capital, that we are spending, next year we will still be spending less on capital than what was proposed to be spending this year.
That's correct.
Okay. In your opinion, as our CFO, do you think that is a sustainable way for us to fund the commitments that we need for disaster management?
So to be perfectly clear, council has options. And I'll put it in simple terms. We can, for the next 10 years, pave less kilometers of roads and substitute it with working on items along the Thames and Sydenham River for that disaster mitigation fund. But just it's a council decision on whether to stop doing other capital works and just focus on those two rivers, or whether to add new funds and still do the same amount of capital works that you did the year before. So as a CFO, I recommend that we fund our asset management plan and not, which includes the annual capital budget of the 6.3 million. And this was a new item. You know, we always took care of the emergencies for slope stabilization, but obviously this is to another level because of the flooding issues. And so, you know, it really becomes a council decision. Do you raise money here, or do you just stop doing work over here to pay for it?
but irregardless, with the way that we're allocating the 585 for this year, are we still going to have the same problem next year? Because this 585, we said if it's going towards one-time things, then we may have that, we're taking it away from the tax base, or we're taking away from the tax impact this year, funding one-time things with it. What's our state next year?
So the benefit, for example, if I use the cemetery roads, those weren't going to be done this year now, prior to this motion. Now you're able to actually get some more work done. So that would be one item knocked off the list on the capital budget for new projects that are presented for next year. So, one-time money is better than no money if you're trying to get the works done.
Fair. So thank you. I'm going to support this motion because I think that it's important that we continuously invest in capital. And, we use the phrase, we're going to punt things to next year. The truth is we had unusually high download from my experience or observations. Others around the table might have more experience, so maybe there's other perspectives, but an unusually high download of services this year. So if the strategy is to spread some of that download over the course of a couple years so that the burden is more easily borne by the taxpayers of Chatham-Kent, I think that's an appropriate strategy to use. And I appreciate Councillor Sakachi being creative to use these funds to identify both capital needs and also some priorities of councillors.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you. So the 585, just to recap from last night, is coming from our community reserve funds, which we get the subsidies come from the casino, Integris, and Ridge landfill, right?
Correct. That's what money that funds that reserve fund. But the specific monies we're talking about is just the one-time extra funds from July 13th when Gateway Casino opened.
But that came from the casino, though. That monies came from the casino.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are casino funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Bondi.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So does this have an impact on our current 3.36?
This motion would not. So this would just would essentially take that one-time money that we had some concerns over sitting in an extra reserve that we discussed yesterday.
So it's currently still sitting in that.
Yeah, still sitting there. And it would apply it to items we already removed from wouldn't be funding from the capital budget. So it was just making sure that one-time money wasn't going to sit around for an extra year and finding a place to apply it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. I wasn't sure if we had actually done anything with that money yesterday, but no, it just stayed where it was. It was discussed.
Identified as something we should do something with it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? So we're voting on these separately. So we'll get the first ones up. Seeing no other questions, I'll call the vote.
Councillor Oche. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-1.
Okay, now we have the second item up. Any questions on this item? That's the 200, or sorry. So we have their, okay, this is the Ridge Council Rights addition first. So that's the $60,000 for a crosswalk. So any questions on this? Councillor Pinstone?
Not a question, just a comment. 2 days ago, we talked about the safety of the cyclists around the river trail. And I can tell you this is a safety issue. We need to support this, honestly. And it's $60,000, one-time money coming from the lottery fund. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan?
Just briefly, I think it's also important to support this. The community is has been very great at expressing some of their opinions in the letters that we received during council. Given the conversation we had yesterday and some of Councillor C. McGregor's comments around the safe school zones, I think it's worth administration during council to go back and look at the different schools across our communities. For example, I know in Wheatley, just last year, there were some concerns about walkers to school and there was a sidewalk study done, and it didn't quite meet that threshold, but for that community, that's really the only walking route to the school. So looking at kind of impact and how impact in our current engineering studies take place, and maybe doing some modifications to accommodate the fact that these school zones need to be prioritized, and the safety of our children is really important.
Councillor, any other questions? We'll go back to you last, Councillor Wright. Yeah. Any other questions or comments on this one? Just before Councillor Wright speaks, this is a very difficult thing not to support. I will say my one point of hesitancy is that there are some other crosswalks identified that are also safety issues. So I can think of one on Grand River Line that I think people have been waiting for 4 or 5 years. That's not far from St. Clair College. There's a medical building there. There's a retirement home across the street. And it's kind of tough to, in budget, sort of leapfrog the will of council initially and move one project ahead of another project. So understanding that, that's my one concern with doing that this way. Councillor Latimer?
Question through the chair. Is that because there wasn't enough traffic to merit that crosswalk when that came up? I think previous councillor Herman brought that. Did she not, Thomas?
Thank you, Budget Chair. That's exactly right. It's been out there for probably 5 years.
So with the increased development out there, I think that should be relooked at. Do we have to bring that back to you, Thomas, and ask you to do that? Or will that automatically happen, viewing the increased development and traffic out at that end of town?
Thank you, Budget Chair. Normally with all crosswalks, we do a study. Just first of all, to confirm that it's warranted. Secondly, it tells us what type of crosswalk we should be putting in for the amount of traffic. In the case of Grand River Line, it's somewhat unique from the standpoint that people don't cross that road because it is busy. And the seniors development across the road, they just won't go across the road. So you don't get the pedestrian traffic. So that's one that we take the data and then we apply a factor that says, you know what, if we put this in there, it would be a safety improvement. And it also connects all of the seniors to not only the medical building, but also our new Greenfield ethanol trail as well, which has been a big demand.
That's kind of the chicken before the egg. I mean,
yeah, but
the reason you're not getting the data is because it is so unsafe. And
right,
now with the increased student enrollment and the new development out there at the end of McNaughton and Grand Ave, I think it would warrant another study, at least another look.
Right. So this one we haven't studied either. And so it's a will of council. You can just tell me, I want one there, as you're doing here. Well, and we'll go back, and we could use the same estimate of 60K. I really don't know, but we could use that if you wanted to put that motion forward.
Well, I will be. I will be supporting this motion, and we'll come back to that outside of budget for the budget chair.
I have Councillor McGrail, followed by Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor McGregor.
Thank you. So I'm struggling with this one. I struggle because this money comes from the casino, right? This money is to be shared with everybody within the municipality of Chatham-Kent. We start doing one-off projects and funding it from this money. I feel then, you know, I would love a crosswalk, right, or a sidewalk in certain areas. The principle is we're not sharing it with everyone. We're giving it to certain people. And heck, I have flooding in my areas too. And that's what I really struggle with is that when we start doing something like this, we start getting away from what that money should be used for, and that's for the whole Chatham-Kent and the whole community.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually following up on some of your comments, Mr. Chair, I'll ask you, Mr. Kelly, is there a list of projects that are listed right now to be looked at? Have we studied any other areas already, or is there a list that I know the comment was made about kind of leapfrogging up the list? Is there a list currently?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So the list is the capital project list that you reviewed yesterday. There were 2 sidewalks on that particular list. As well, we continually go out and, as requested, we do a study because things are always changing, right? And we have a list of those areas that we're going to do this year and then determine, again, the process. You study, determine if it's warranted. If it is warranted, we come back to council with that recommendation and add it to the capital list. That's our current process.
Okay, so what, by adding this in, what would get bumped down? What wouldn't happen by adding this in?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So this is the will of council. It's separate from the capital list, so nothing gets bumped.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGregor?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that this motion of Councillor Wright's came up at our last meeting and we directed it towards the budget. I think this is a very creative way to do it. I know we have other ones we need to look at and that probably needs to come back to another council session, but we did direct this particular crosswalk. I will be supporting the motion and I hope others would too. I know the difficulties we went through in our own community, trying to ensure a crosswalk in our own area. So you have my full support on this, and I hope others will see the same.
Councillor Finn?
I just wanted to state basically the same as Councillor McGregor. Being an officer, I know that area very well. Those cars come in, they don't slow at the bend. When you come around the bend, there's a school there. Those kids don't see those cars coming. We've been very lucky, knock on wood. Nobody has been hit. These are our kids. These are our future. I know it's not everybody benefiting from it, but those kids there need some safety.
Any other questions, comments, clarifications to this motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-1.
Next item is the $200,000 for 1 year of the sandbag program. Any questions or comments on this one? Councillor Sakachi?
I just think this is an effective way that we can establish a pilot program to address some of the challenges that we're seeing right now. And I think Councillor McGrail made a very good comment in regards to something about something benefiting all the communities. This is something that will benefit all communities. This isn't going to be an ask every year, but what this can do is at the end of this year, we can go back to administration and task them to develop a report to see how effective this program was. Is it effective? Was it beneficial to the residents? Was it used properly? As well as I know in the Blenheim open house, there was multiple questions and comments about the sandbags coming back not recommended, and also a lot of the statements that were made in the Blenheim open house regarding there's nothing really we're going to do until we receive this report. So when the report comes, we're not going to be able to do anything right away. So this is at least an effective mitigation, offer we can do to some of our residents in Wallsburg when they're flooding, Erie Shore Drive, Erie O, Shrewsbury, all along the Thames. So this will benefit everybody around this table at some point, I feel. Thank you.
Mayor Caniff.
Thank you, Budget Chair. When I look at this, there's a business in Chatham-Kent that provides this service currently. Is that correct? I believe that Pebbles provides sandbags.
There's a company in Chatham-Kent that actually makes sandbags. Pebbles certainly distributes sandbags as well.
Okay, so we have a business that already does that, so we would be displacing a current business by doing this. So right now, everybody in Chatham-Kent, I believe, has access to the business if they need sandbags. So what my gap is how by providing this, what difference does it make to me if I'm having flooding? Is it just that I go to a Chatham-Kent dispensary for sandbags and pay nothing, or I go to a business in Chatham-Kent and acquire them for X dollars a sandbag? So is that the only difference we're looking at, or does this create a different availability where a resident can't get sandbags right now, but would provide them going forward. That's the difference for me I'm looking at.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. To clarify that a little bit, the report we brought to council at the last council meeting indicated that if this program was approved as a pilot or not, we believe this would be better outsourced through an RFP to an outside firm. So it would be almost a business that's already in Chatham-Kent that would supply these sandbags. We would just be subsidizing basically those sandbags.
So to clarify, then if I'm experiencing flooding, the only difference for me would be is that the sandbags would be cheaper or free. They'd be free for so many of them based on the proposal, and then I have to pay for them. So that's the only difference here. It doesn't provide any extra service to those individuals experiencing flooding. It just would subsidize the cost of the sandbags.
That's correct. According to the program, the way it was brought to us by motion was 85 sandbags per property. Free, paid for by the municipality, delivered by an already existing
And it is
supplier.
not income, so if you have someone that is a multimillionaire can come in and get free 85 bags, or if someone can't afford anything, it doesn't discriminate against income or anything else. It's just free sandbags.
Correct. The only classification would be it would only be available during high water and flood warnings based geographically. So if it was kind of a flood warning for Erie Shore Drive, there would be a geographical boundary drawn. Anybody with a property in that area would get up to 85 free sandbags.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGrail?
Thank you. Ryan, I have a question. Do we have a provider that will provide the service and ensure that the proper residents get what they need and the 85 sandbags per those proper residents?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. Through our investigation, doing those reports, we talked to a specific supplier that was interested in that. Obviously, we have not tendered this yet, and we can't predict who would bid on a tender. But my understanding is there probably is people that would bid on this kind of opportunity.
Councillor Hall?
Thank you. With the proposed program, is the idea to have one central location where everybody in Chatham-Kent can go and get these free sandbags, or is there going to be, different locations, like i.e. in Wallaceburg and Blenheim and other communities?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. Obviously, we haven't written a tender yet, but most likely, I believe that because this would be a private company bidding on this contract, it would probably be one location here in Chatham-Kent, unless there was a business who had multiple locations across Chatham-Kent to provide that service. The other things we identified in our report from last time, that there would be some restrictions we would put in the tender, such as you need to be open 12 hours per day or 7 days a week during a declared flood emergency, so that, if we have an event on a weekend, we need to be sure that that business is open for a good amount of time to allow people to go and get their sandbags.
Councillor Pinsnow, followed by Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Residents along the waterways and the lakes have been devastated in the last year, maybe 2 years, with this high water. And I think this is a perfect spot for the funding to come from, because you are helping, a pretty big chunk of Chatham-Kent. We have water everywhere. And hopefully the water drops next year, and we're only going to need to have this one-time money. So I am going to support it.
Councillor Wright?
Thank you. To me, we have to start somewheres, and this is a start to get this on the right program. It's a lot of money, but it's a good start. And it's probably going to ease some people's mind knowing that there's something available. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan?
I just wanted to comment that many of us likely who live in wards that are on the lakes or rivers or waterways have been asked by members of the public, what are you going to do to fix what is inherently a very complicated multi-million-dollar problem? I could even potentially say $1 billion if we're talking about some of the areas on the bluffs and that work. And it's even unclear to me as a councillor how much tax dollars municipally we should be allocating towards this problem. And I think we do in our advocacy work need to have some conversations with the provincial governments and federal governments once we have the information from the study that comes back. And I think what Councillor Sakachi here is trying to spearhead is the idea that just because the problem is massive doesn't mean we can't do anything. And so this is a very small supplemental budget item that lets us do something to help people. And if it's the difference between saving water from somebody's basement or walkout basement and not, or water damage, or that insurance claim that no longer qualifies somebody for insurance, then I think that it's money well spent in our community because we are very much surrounded by water.
Councillor Solomon.
I think it's great that sandbags are available from private enterprise, the same as the mayor mentioned, but I'm puzzled why we're suggesting they be free. That people who don't live on the water or have waterfront properties would subsidize those who do. Now, I know that people who are on waterfront properties are overtaxed, but that's why we should be cutting budgets, cutting taxes. But I'm just wondering why we're suggesting they'd be free. Today, there is high water. I had somebody at my house in noon hour who lives on Lake Erie and told me exactly that. I had somebody else at my house who has a place on the bay and told me the water's high too. So they'd get 85 bags by showing up and telling you, hey, the water's high in the lake today, and it's going to be for the next 2 years. So you're going to be getting that every. I mean, I don't understand how you do it. If somebody on Lake Erie right now, this person lived in Erie Beach, and they told me the water's high today and it's crashing against some neighbors have put in steel wall, and now it's hitting the steel wall and going up. This is in Erie Beach, not on the Dyke Road, so they're not going to get a lot of pity. But they can come tomorrow if this program is in place. They would come tomorrow and say, "Give me the 85 bags," right?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. Our last report to council, we brought at the last council meeting, highlighted that the 85 bags per property would only be available under declared flood warnings, which is declared by Lower Thames Conservation Authority or the St. Clair region.
Well, that doesn't happen very often.
On Erie Shore Drive, it happens quite often.
Oh, it does in Erie Shore Drive, and this isn't going to solve the problem there. So, I mean, this is one of those tiny little Band-Aids that you get, not even the bigger ones that you put on. But there are other places that there's high water splashing over. A lot of Vireo last summer would have told you the same thing, but I don't know that it was ever declared by the Lower Thames. Winds can come from the northeast across Rondo Bay, or they come from the south into Erie Beach, or where do they come? They come from the west into Mitchell Bay, Wallaceburg, southwest. I'm just trying to rationalize this. I mean, it's one of those things that is a feel-good kind of thing that doesn't solve anything but costs $200,000. I'm just trying to rationalize it and tell me and understand why it's a public expense.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. I just wanted to mention one thing. We're just trying to look up the original wording of the direction from council to administration to develop this program, because I believe it did have a line item regarding when the free sandbags would be implemented to residents. So we're just trying to look that up.
I'm quite in favor of the municipality developing a municipal sandbag program. The only question is it something that you develop that there's a subsidy, or you pay for half the bag, or you do that? But it seems to me like it's free sandbags. They're not really going to solve a problem along the clay cliffs of Lake Erie, obviously. And it's not going to solve a problem on the Dyke Road. It's just not enough. It would be 80,000 sandbags to solve that problem, or more. So I'm just trying to rationalize it. Just explain it to me so I can be supportive or not supportive, or at least knowing that I'm thinking about it rationally rather than emotionally.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. We just clarified. So the original wording from the direction to administration was available only during high water and flood warnings. Was the direction to administration to not hand them out to free for everybody on any day? It was during high water or flood warnings.
And that's what I was asking at the beginning. So it's not declared by the lower Thames. It's high water or flood warnings. That's what I thought. And we got 2 years of high water. That's how I started all this. I said the person from Erie Beach was at my house at 1 o'clock, and they said it's high water and it's splashing up, and the beach is gone. And another person said the same thing at Erie O. So I'm just confused. It's going to be high water, so it's going to be available all the time. Anyway, I just try to make rational decisions based on facts.
Any other questions or comments? We'll go to Councillor Sakachi last. Councillor Sakachi?
Yeah, I guess I just kind of wanted to say a couple of last points. This isn't a perfect solution. It's far from a perfect solution. Talking about the flood warnings, I think that Councillor Hall and Councillor C. McGregor can realize that just recently you had multiple flood warnings in Wallsburg where we were close to having a major issue. This isn't something that I'm trying to just reciprocate to Ward 2 in this particular area. And talking to Mr. Kelly as well, he was very vocal in regards to the aspect of having local suppliers here, that it could be detrimental to their business. So we had a good conversation about the outsourcing, which eliminates that problem. I think it would be actually a big positive for that to remain in Chatham-Kent, and that's going to help their business. But this isn't a solution. That's why we're going to try it for a one time. And a lot of people, say the comments, well, they choose to live close to the water. I don't look at it that way. I think that they choose to live in Chatham-Kent. So we can't always have a perfect solution how to correct the what's going on now. This is a very small, it is a Band-Aid, I completely agree, but what it does, it gives us a tool to look at something after 1 year to see if it works. It came as not recommended, so I'm very, I'm a strong advocate that Mr. Kelly and Mr. Brown will come at the end of the year, and if it doesn't work, and say to us, it doesn't work. And then we can look at it differently and we can adjust it, or we can just no longer utilize the program. I just think this is something that's very beneficial. Everybody around here can see at least one time and end the discussion, will it work or won't it work? But I can tell you we'll have a lot of residents in our area that will utilize this. If we have to come back to council again with regards to some of the wording changes, but I know that just recently in Chatham as well, how long was the flood warnings going on? Even Chief Case could attest to this. We were very close to having, if the river plugged up this year, close to having another emergency in Chatham, where the downtown core would be flooding. So every single ward could have the potential to utilize this in a flooding situation. And if the wording needs to be changed a little bit, then we can come back later. I just want to ensure at this present time that the funding is there.
With that, I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 13-4.
So the next item that we'll move on to is we do have one more item that was referred to budget, and that was the variance report. So we'll get an update on that.
Thank you. So tab 7, line 163 is for roadside drainage in the amount of $2,260,000. EMT was recommending that be funded from one-time 2019 surpluses, but at your January 13th council meeting, the motion from council was to defer the variance report. Was to defer the variance report to a budget discussion. So we're now short $2,260,000, which is a 1.5% add to the budget, unless we approve using last year's surplus monies as per the variance report. So this is the motion on the screen.
Councillor Crew?
I will move that motion. I'm not going to read it all.
Yeah. Seconded by Councillor Kirkwood-White. Any questions, comments on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
All right, so now we're back into the binder. So we ended on page 2 of tab 6 on item 25. So any items 26 to 41 that anyone would like a question or comment or motion on? We only got to the top of page 2, so just if there's anything else on there, we'll still entertain motions on it. So it's tab 6, page 2, items 26 to 41. Okay, we'll move to the next page. If anyone really needs to go backwards, we can, though. Oh, sorry. Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Budget Chair. Listening to the deputation tonight, and I understand that things that were canceled can be brought back up, and I would like to bring up item 25 again to see if the flavor has changed so that we can put that 419,906 back in for child care spots.
Okay, so that's for the whole amount back in?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a second to that motion? Councillor Finn? We had pretty good discussion on this last night, so I'll still entertain anyone that wants to speak on it, but we'll try and keep it as brief as we can. Councillor Pinsnow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have to send a message to the province. We did the right thing last night. It's for 1 year. We'll see what happens next year. We got to find cuts somewhere.
Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. I just wanted to say to Ryan, who did the deputation, that I very much appreciated him coming forward and talking about that importance, and our conversation on social media last night, which I thought was very respectful. So it's nice to have those debates in a respectful way. Something that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of this is around April's comments yesterday about that couple or the family who's kind of just barely able to afford to pay for childcare. And what really sits with me, it makes me a bit uncomfortable, is when we are providing taxpayer dollars and applying them universally across income distributions. So the family that makes $150,000 is getting that same $10 a day subsidy or $5 a day subsidy as the family that's making maybe $45,000. And I think we can, through policy, and I've been brainstorming the type of motion that I could bring forward, and I'll certainly be working with April to do so, but through policy, we can make sure that despite the cut with the $2 million investment that we are putting forward, through provincial money into childcare, we can make sure that those dollars are going to the right people and the people who need them most if we're going to choose to provide that additional support to childcare providers in the event that we cannot expand. So I certainly agree again that this is difficult, but if we were to frame it to say, in this budget, we put $2 million towards expansion of childcare spaces and to go towards childcare, the general public would say, that's a great amount, good work. It's because we know that there was once 2.4 that makes this a bit of a difficult conversation. And I think policy can bridge the gap so that the people who still need those childcare spaces can receive them.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to April. April, how many, this is for, sorry, first off, this is for new builds, correct?
So when we look at expansion dollars, they are always used to increase childcare spaces. So typically looking at, they might be new builds, they might be retrofits, they might be expansions to current operators that want to increase the number of spots that they have, any number of ways in terms of increasing childcare spaces for that.
Okay, so, and how many did we have last year, do you know? People apply for this?
In terms of expansion dollars?
Correct.
So we have a number of operators who are just in the process now of looking at building spaces and increasing spaces, and those are spread really across the municipality. So the actual number, I would have to get that in terms of the number of total spaces. But certainly each year, in terms of expansion, we need more spaces, and we will use whatever dollars we have in terms of going out and trying to secure more spaces. In the event that we, and I said this last night, in the event that we do not expand to the max of what we have, that's when we look at providing that benefit to families, which in the past has been done universally this last year. And I appreciate Councillor Harrigan's comments. It's always a fine balance between how much energy do you put in terms of cost to look at doing the income testing. So that's a significant amount of staff time to look at doing that, and would probably outweigh, it would use a ton of that money just to deal with doing that piece of it, which is why last year we chose, for the small amount we had, to do that universally. So
last year, through you, Chair, last year, or you're saying this year you're actually getting all the requests this year? Is that correct? Did you say for new?
So for our expansion spaces with the money that we have will be used for this year. Yes.
So taking this $419,906 out is going to leave some people short. Is that correct?
Well, it will always impact, because we could have more spaces if we had that money. So,
if we have people willing to.
Right, if we have people willing to build them. Yes.
But we don't know yet if we're at.
In terms of that additional, no.
Okay. How were we last year? Do you know? Did we use everything?
We used all of our money. Yes, we did.
Because we sent out.
Because we've done it in a number of ways. We dealt with expansions, we dealt with additions, and we dealt with providing a benefit to families. So we did use all of our money. And part of the reasoning behind that is if we didn't, it would go back to the province and it would go to another municipality. They would send that money out somewhere else. Okay. So we use every cent we get, for sure.
All right. Thank you.
Councillor Finn, followed by Mayor Caniff.
As we stated before, we have an influx of people coming into the community. Right now we have 800 plus shortage of spots for daycare. If we show the providers that there is funding going to be available to do an expansion, we're going to provide more spaces. That waiting list could come down. If you have a newcomer coming into this city, they're not going to know anybody to provide a home daycare. They're going to have to look. If we're showing that we're at least looking towards expanding daycares, it might give them a little added boost to come in saying that childcare is important to us.
Thank you. Mayor Caniff?
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one key piece here is we may use it. We don't know whether we're going to have enough people taking up. I think all around here we all agree we need more childcare space. What sold me on the idea to not support it previously was that we may or may not use it. What I would suggest that if we get halfway through the year and you're saying, you know what, there's all these people that want to build daycare and this is the barrier, we can come back and look at it for this year to say, if we can subsidize more. What I don't want to do is put 419 out there and it's not going to be used in a tough year where we're at right now and go into reserve or be used for something else. So that's what I'm looking at it here. Because I know if we said, yes, we have more demand than we ever, and we will build spaces with this money, I might have a different, but when we say we may or may not use it, but I would certainly entertain 6 months from now if you had a drive for a lot more spaces that need to be developed, because certainly that is a barrier in our community. So that's just where I'm at there, that we could always look at it. April, you come back and say, we have people that want to build, we need the money. So thank you.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Darn fingernails. Through you, Mr. Chair, to April. A question with regard to if there was a method by which those funds, if approved, were distributed to families that needed a bit of a subsidy, would those funds have to go to a licensed childcare, or could they go to unlicensed childcare?
Through you, Budget Chair, thank you for the question. So our dollars that we receive within childcare are for licensed childcare spaces. The tax credit that we talked about for some time last night, that can be used for the other unlicensed childcare.
Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Solomon.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Gord, I'm intrigued by one suggestion, and that is that if partway through the year you found that you had a need for it, the money, we have a strategic reserve, and to me this might, from the argument that's being made over here is that you've got to encourage other new people in the community. You've heard all that. That seems to me to be more strategic than shiny objects that we sometimes spend money on from strategic reserves. So I want to know if we got in that position, we could use, I take it we could use the strategic reserve fund to fund for that short period of time and examine it in the next year's budget.
Throughout the year, council can make decisions on any of the reserves to fund anything.
So that might be the way that satisfies the whole problem. So that's rather than adding it back in now when I agree with comments that are made. We've got to. This is a tough budget, and you got to find the cuts. But if there's a problem halfway through, we have a strategic reserve. We don't need to use that for parties or shiny objects. We can use it for this kind of strategy. So that's the way I prefer to approach it. And if we just leave what we did last night, we'd still have that availability anytime throughout the year. If you brought it forward, if through the chairman, Dr. Redtyke brought it forward to us. And by the way, just one comment, because some wise person told me this. It's not just expanding the buildings. It could be that people are working shift work and the child care center decides, oh, well, we've been running it during the day, but we now got sufficient demand to run from 5 to 11 or whatever, because of people who in this gig economy are doing shift work, different shifts among the family members. Correct?
Yes, and I said that last night. So not only is it bricks and mortar, it could be doing retrofits to expand different rooms, to increase timing, any number of ways expansion dollars can be used.
Right, or leave the building the same and just expand the use to different hours of it. Right. Yeah, okay. Anyway, that's where I'm at on it, and I don't know that we need it. My big fear is that all the good work we did last night on the bottom line may come back, and there's a logical way to do this, a non-emotional, logical way to deal with this throughout the year if it becomes a problem.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Budget Chair. And I'm listening and everything's sounding great. But the thing we got to remember is we changed our transit system to accommodate people working off shifts. But we're not willing to change childcare to accommodate them to look after their children. So I'm not sure, sort of an oxymoron to me. You know, we're willing to look at transportation and accommodate those needs, but not willing to look at how we can improve childcare. So the argument is that we have to send a message to the government. Well, we got cuts in other areas. Why use childcare to do that? and I'm getting mixed messages here. Dr. Redike is telling me, or telling us, that there is a need. The mayor is indicating that there isn't a need, or an immediate need. And I guess that's something that we really don't know. So my theory is that we want to be a welcoming community. We want to entice young people to come here by providing the services that young families need. And this, in my opinion, is definitely one. And I think that we should reconsider our thoughts on what we're doing here.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion fails 6-11.
Okay, we'll continue. Any other items on that page? Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. Excuse me. Just some questions about item number 39, which is a zero value item. I think I warned people I'd be asking about some of these zero value items. There is a comment about labor contractual obligations, but I don't believe my question is around those items. Through the chair, just thinking about mental health and the drug addiction strategy and a lot of the challenges that our community, among all other communities, are experiencing, I was a bit perplexed about the removal of the public health nurse position in order to meet ministry budget targets, and the note that the following services may be impacted: health counseling to students, supportive school wellness committees and initiatives, and sexual health clinics. So I'm just wondering if April can provide a bit of commentary around, how this position was brought forward, and if there's any partnerships that are currently in place, for example, with school boards where this service can be supplemented elsewhere, or if this is suddenly a gap in our community.
So through you, Budget Chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Harrigan. For those councillors where this is your second budget, and this, for whatever reason, wasn't raised last go around, public health funding has been frozen for 5 years now. So our entire envelope or our entire budget has been impacted negatively because of that. So year over year, because of that freeze in our funding, we are forced to come up with any of the cost of living increases that happen, any of our collective agreement increases that happen. We have to come up with that internally in our own department. So we look at things very, very carefully. And each year we have had to come forward with, we are predominantly a staff-based budget, providing services to the community. So we as a group sit and think very long and hard as to how to decrease staff and have as little impact as possible. Does that mean that there's no impact? No, there is. Every time we lose a nurse or a home visitor or an educator or a public health inspector, we have to look at our programs and services and look at how we're delivering services to meet the needs of the community so that we meet the public health standards. So we work very diligently with our community partners to make sure that the impact is as little as possible. For this, other than council moving to putting more share of the dollars in and going over the mandated 70-30, there's no other way to do this other than that.
Right. I have to say there's a bit of a level of discomfort that I have around this staffing reduction in particular. We hear about there's obviously criticism anytime that we're adding staff, or I guess in this case, not removing staff in budget. But this position to me seems like it's an incredibly boots on ground position. Like this is somebody who is providing counseling services to students that may, provide long-term positive impact on their lives. I think of sexual health clinics, and again, the long-term negative implications if those sexual health clinic services aren't offered. And I certainly don't want to position one person's role in a completely different department from another person's role doing different things, right? The work that happens across the municipality is value add always in their different ways. But if I had to choose between adding to management and administration and adding towards nursing and public health, I think that it's important that we do that. And so this is another one that I kind of hummed and hawed about in terms of the level of comfort, because I'm also assuming that the public health unit, the board was consulted in the creation of this briefing note.
So through you, Budget Chair. So certainly the board has been very aware of our funding freeze and is knowledgeable in terms of programs and services. And they struggle as well in terms of how do we go about doing this. Over the years, we have cut from everywhere, including management positions, as we move through. So for this year, within looking at where we know we have to cut somewhere and where do we do that, these have both been done through attrition as well, so nobody has lost their job because of this. And the programs have been able to look at their service delivery model to assume all of the program standards that we're required to deliver. So while I appreciate your comments too, we all feel that way, and I'm sure the Board of Health feels that way as well. But I do have to indicate that the council needs to be aware that they would be funding above the required funding. And there are lots of councils that do that across the province. So it's a tough answer. Mm-hmm. So one, we have not lost any staff. Two, the programs have looked at their service delivery models to maximize the work that they do. But for me to say that there would be no impact, I can't. There will be impact.
Okay, thank you. The comments that you've made, the statements I had made earlier about concern about reduced services certainly still stands. And I really just I wanted to bring the matter forward. I will not be moving that this item be brought back into the budget. I think I think it's important that we have the conversation. So, thank you.
Councillor Latimer?
So not to go off too far topic, I just want to say I would be looking forward to our harm reduction services report coming, along with being apprised of what the increased services have been afforded to mental health and our younger individuals through the mental health access in the school board budgets, because they've put a lot of emphasis on that over the last 2 years and are very actively involved. And I know you were in partnership with them on that too as well, April. That's it.
Thank you. And maybe just to Councillor Harrigan, this is a 5-year-long struggle for Board of Health members going through this, and this is why the harm reduction motion was brought in council, not to the Board of Health, frankly. Next page, Councillor McGregor.
Thank you. I just need some clarity, and actually it goes over 2 pages, but it's the same item. So it's item 55. Financial services, accounting services, $69,000 reduced revenue due to the change of a 3 to 2 year tax sale. If you go to the briefing note on that particular item on 55, I had it right here in my hand. Where is it? Oh, here. It says that the lost revenues are $100 or $1,200, $500 here, and now we've got $69,000 over here. So I'm trying to figure out, one, on that, why it's costing us more when we now have reduced accounting services, because we're not charging the late fees on the automatic payment people. So that one, though, is also connected to item number 96, which is the other one here. And this one is, where are you, 96? 96. General revenues, investment income, $250,000. Reduced late payment charges from lower tax receivable accounts balances. But if you go to the briefing note on 96, it again refers back to the adjustment we made to in this same area, because I think it came under that same motion, and this is charging lower tax receivable account balances, lower tax revenue balances are the result of changing from 3-year tax sale process to a 2-year tax process. So I'm just trying to understand why we have $250,000 by changing a process there, and why we have $69,000 on accounting services over and above the $12,500 that we're actually losing in revenue. So I'm trying to figure out why we have extra accounting fees for a lower amount of service that we have to deliver. If you could explain all that to me, then I'd be happy.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So for financial services, there's an arrears notice that is sent out 10 months of the year to property owners that have arrears.
Mm-hmm.
When the policy switched from a 3-year tax sale to a 2-year tax sale, if you're in the tax sale process, you don't have arrears notices sent to you, and you're also not charged arrears notice in the first year that you're in arrears. So really, we went from having 2 years of arrears notices sent out to individuals that they were paying for when we were in a 3-year tax sale, down to just 1 year when we switched to a 2-year tax sale, because they're not paying the arrears notice for the first year.
Well, usually on these tax sales, they're not paying anything anyway.
They are recouped. All the interest, charges, and fees go towards the cancellation price of the tax sale, and they are recouped by the municipality.
So how does that cost us $250? I'm sorry, I'm
So
still out there.
so that's the $69,000 arrears notice fee.
That's the $69,000.
And as relates to the $250,000 reduction in revenue, so when Matt Torrance presented the BMA study, one of the things he mentioned was that our taxes receivable has actually been decreasing substantially over the last number of years. One of the main reasons is switching from a 3-year to a 2-year tax sale, along with the better conditions where people are actually paying their taxes in time. So as a result, we're not receiving that interest on the people that have arrears outstanding.
So I'll just...
Okay, well, I'm just going to say shame on us for even like the monies we were collecting, the $10 fees for sending out notices all the time.
Just to clarify, it's not a $69,000 expense. It's a $69,000 reduction in revenue is what's actually happening, because we're not charging those individuals that money any longer. So we're actually receiving $69,000 less in revenue annually. So that's what that is. That $69,000 line item is.
And the
reduction in revenue.
$12,500 is simply the $10 late fee.
So in the
as opposed to
that was from the previous council. There was a motion that anybody that was on a payment plan would not be charged. So that's why there, historically over the past couple of years, there has been a slight decrease in the revenue as a result of that. And then also the bulk of this now, the $69,000, really relates to the 2-year tax sale.
Okay, well, I'm obviously, I'm a little thick here because it's still not really sinking in, but I'll talk to you afterwards, and I won't hold up the budget committee on trying to, yeah, I'm gonna need pictures, okay? Thanks.
Mayor Caniff?
Just to follow up on that, so is that $250,000 net? So we would have received the money, and we would have been charging 7 or 8%, whatever the percentage is. We're going to receive it. We're going to get 3. Is there an offset in here to say we've got more money in this bank account now because we're going to collect 3% on? Is that somewhere in here as the offset, or is the 250 a net number?
So you're correct. We do have more money in our bank accounts because we're collecting our taxes. So that's reflected in the base increase in interest income on, and maybe you can find the line for me.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure it was reflected. That's all. Thanks.
But I just wanted to stay, this is a good, the 250 is a hit to our budget, but it's actually a good news story. People are paying their taxes on time. There's half outstanding than there used to be about 6 years ago. So it's great news. We charge, as across the province, in the legislation, we charge 1.25% per month on overdue taxes. People are paying their taxes, so we're getting less interest income. So that's why we're, so it's a good news for the residents. They're paying $250,000 less in interest charges on outstanding taxes. Of course, it's a negative to our budget.
Good news. All right, Councillor Solomon.
Line 48. It's the $140,000 service vehicle. Okay, so I read the, Mr. Chairman, I read the briefing note, and it looks like what has happened is we've been using a ambulance vehicle that had been retired from the ambulance service, and now it's got so old that it's being permanently retired to wherever old ambulances go. Ambulance heaven, I guess. But my question was, or ambulance hell, depending on what it did during its lifetime. So the question is, do we have other retired ambulance vehicles that could substitute in its place, number one? And the second one is fire vehicles. I seem to have a recollection, I may be wrong, that we had an old fire vehicle that went to Newfoundland or someplace.
Rescue.
Where?
You need a rescue.
Yeah, a rescue unit, I guess it really was. Why? I'm wondering what, this must be either it's a Porsche or a very big truck. I'm just trying to look at the price of 140,000. I know what you're doing with it. It's just that it looked like you did something very creative or somebody did something very creative last time, and I appreciate that, in converting an ambulance to haul water. But it looks like we're not being as creative this time. We're spending on a rather expensive truck.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So kind of a two-part question there, and I believe Kevin's going to help answer with some of the fire question. But so in the past, over not just this truck, other trucks, ambulances used to be used up to 200,000 kilometers or so, and then Public Works could take them over for their end of life. However, the ambulances are now being used much, much longer, and by the time they're at their end of life now, there's no useful life for Public Works left for them. So we haven't been getting these cheap ambulances that we can convert to a water service truck. So it's not hauling water, it's hauling tools. So imagine that this is like an ambulance-sized vehicle with a massive service body on the back to hold tools and water parts and fire hydrants, and et cetera. So the reason it's quite expensive, it's a quite large pickup truck, and then a very expensive service body to hold all those tools and all that equipment. So we've been creative in the past. However, with our ambulance fleet, we now don't have these retired ambulances that have any useful life left in them to come to us. So we're asking to put this in as a replaceable vehicle. And I'll hand it over to Kevin to answer if there's fire vehicles available.
Yeah. And Kevin, could you also, through the chair, could you also correct me if I was wrong about a fire vehicle? You get so many kilometers on them, and they're still useful because they get shipped to other communities. So have we done that lately, and why can't we use one?
Through you, Budget Chair, thank you for the question. Our fire vehicles are based on a 20-year life cycle under NFPA legislation. Mm-hmm. And right at the moment, we simply don't have any rescue vehicles which would do this job, to simply put it. And I would point out that Mr. Brown alluded to the fact that the ambulances were at the end of their useful life cycle. This vehicle that we're requesting now will become a replaceable vehicle. So each year they'll be putting money away for the replacement of that same vehicle at the end of its useful life cycle. So it'll be spread out over a 15-year period, as opposed to these ambulances, which we don't have availability for, and the new ambulance new deployment, if you will, makes them basically worn out, so they're not accessible to use for this application.
So, back to the fire question. I realize it's not a fire; it's a rescue truck, but it's a fire
apparatus.
So, did we get rid of one recently in the last 2 years?
There's a rescue vehicle being tendered right now, but we won't take delivery of it for a year and a half because of the time to build a fire truck. But no, we haven't had any rescue vehicles for approximately 3 years.
Okay, but we would have one available as soon as the new rescue vehicle arrives.
Unfortunately, though, the one we have as a spare rescue, this one that's coming, the one that it would be replacing, will then become the spare. Because the one we have as a spare now, I believe, is about 30 years old, and it's past its useful life.
Well, I applaud your creativity with the ambulance vehicle, and I would like to applaud creativity with a fire vehicle. I just swallow hard when I see a $140,000 vehicle when we were being pretty creative before. So that's all on that one.
I think Gord just had something to add to that as well.
Just to add what Kevin said it, but I just want to be clear on one thing. Over the next 15 years, the value of this vehicle will be charged to the PUC because it's a public works doing water work orders. So every work order, they charge for the staff time and the vehicle. So the money will be there from the PUC to pay for it.
Yeah.
Next time in 15 years. So we won't have this repeating itself every time these trucks in the future. So for whoever's around the horseshoe 15 years from now, they want to pay for the
I'll
next
still be
one.
here, but it'll be with a walker. But what I really wanted to say was that's sort of illusory because most of Chatham-Kent now are ratepayers. It wasn't that way 20 years ago, but because we've run water lines everywhere, most of Chatham-Kent are ratepayers. So it's the same people paying for it, whether it's the PUC paying through the water rates and sewage rates, or whether it's the taxpayer paying through the tax rates. So at one point in time, that might have been a bit better argument. But right now, we're all the same tax. There's only one taxpayer for the most part. So I asked my questions. I'm done.
Okay, I have two lists. So are Councillor Sakachi and Harrigan on this same item? Okay, so Councillor Harrigan first.
Thank you. Just a question that I have, thinking about being in the public sector versus the private sector, and the content of your briefing note identifying to accommodate a number of different sizes and types of water, wastewater inventory parts needed to have on hand in case of emergencies. Is there a cheaper way to get those parts rather than having it in a single unit? And I'm thinking about trailers, right, towed on the back of a pickup truck. And can you tell me if that was considered and if that would be a cheaper option and why this one was presented instead?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. There's a couple considerations. One is that some of these water parts need to remain warm and that service body is insulated. And so a trailer is not a good application for that. Also, on the cleanliness of that unit, you're putting tools and valve and repair pieces. An open trailer is not the best thing for those kind of parts. And also, it has to do with time. The big benefit we've seen from having these service trucks, which we do have in some of our other public works garages, is that when there's a water main break, we need to get there now with the parts. And so they grab the truck that already has the tools and the parts and they go, as opposed to having to load things up, tools that may be contaminated from other jobs. So it's really the most efficient way to do this, and we've done it in other garages with great success.
So it's like an ambulance for our infrastructure when things break then. And okay, thank you.
Councillor Sakachi.
Through you, Chair, we had an opportunity to talk really briefly when I was coming in. I just really want a one-word answer. Is this a need, a want, or a necessity, you feel?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. This ask is a necessity. This existing truck that's in service has 368,000 kilometers on it. And so with no ambulance or other truck available to replace it, it could easily break tomorrow.
And just one follow-up question. It's not related to the exact tab, but something similar, since I have the floor. Item 50, I'm going to ask you the same question for the tractor. Is it a need, a want, or a necessity as well? Just because, this is obviously a very difficult year, and if your finances are cut at home, you don't look to purchase a new car. So if it's a necessity, or it's one thing, but if it's just a want, I can't support that ask. So I just wanted to clarify that for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So this is regarding the next briefing note. If the first one is a necessity, I would say this one is a need. There is an existing way to accomplish these activities we're asking for, which is what we're doing now. However, we feel that we can greatly increase service times with the South Water Crew, who don't have a backhoe right now, to move some of our equipment around and get them a permanent backhoe. To do that, we need to increase a tractor that's over at the Tilbury garage so they can load salt with it in the winter. So it's kind of a multi-shuffle we're doing with our fleet. However, we can do this work now, but the way they're getting this work done is either hiring backhoes from contractors and having them come to the site and meet us there, or getting a backhoe from another public works garage to come to the site and get there. And so by having their own backhoe, there's efficiencies we feel that get us to a job site quicker to fix a water main. So this is something we're currently doing. I think there's a way to save money here in the long run. However, the situation is maybe not as dire as a truck with almost 400,000 kilometers on it.
Okay, so moving on from that item, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. My question here is on line 62. I see we lost 25,000 with people paying with a credit card there. Are taxes at the front desk paid by credit card too? Are they, or?
Yeah. Thank you, through the budget chair. When credit card machines were introduced in about year 2000, a report was brought to council that allowed everything to be paid except for taxes, long-term Riverview Gardens long-term care rents, and the social housing rents, because we're losing 2% every time we collect it. So to allow allow people to use credit cards to pay their taxes, we need $3 million to pay their credit card fees.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair? Yep. Can I just jump in as the GM for the area? Sure. I just want to say our emphasis on providing good customer service, from my perspective, includes providing different ways for people to pay their bills.
So. Any more comments on this item? Councillor Oche, did you have an item on this page?
I did, and I believe Anthony may have covered it. I'll ask one question. So this is going to be, there he is.
Sorry, which item, Councillor Oche?
Sorry, 50.
50.
This is going to be spread across, like, Tilbury right to Blenheim, from what I can see in the briefing note. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. This is regarding the backhoe and the tractor upgrade.
Correct.
That's correct. So the South Water Crew services all of Public Works south of the river, more or less. So they do water main breaks from Wheatley to Tilbury to Ridgetown.
Okay. Thank you for that. Then just one more question, Mr. Chair, to you, Ryan, as well. Can you tell me, you said we bring in a lot of private businesses with their backhoe. Do we know what we pay on that? Like, what this would save us compared to outsourcing it?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So we ran some numbers this week trying to break that down. It's not quite so easy, but so South Water Crew in 2018 spent over $200,000 on contractors, and from the best we could pull together this week, we think it's somewhere around $20,000 to $30,000 regarding just specific backhoe services that the South Water Crew utilized. So with this backhoe, there may still be instances where it's quicker to get the Ridgetown Public Works backhoe to a water main break, but we feel that there's maybe a $20,000 savings per year in backhoe contracting fees that we could cut off by doing this flip.
So basically in 3 years it would be paid for. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So 4 years, more or less.
4 years. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Solomon?
That's that same one. And I wondered, backhoe at $75,000 seems low, but is that the full cost? I mean, the trucks seemed high at 140. The backhoe seems low at 75.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So once again, is a little bit of a complex ask where.
Okay.
So you're correct. This is really low for a backhoe, and that's because this isn't to purchase a backhoe. This is to upgrade an existing tractor that is at the Tilbury Public Works Division, upgrade it to an industrial tractor, so that's heavier duty with a bucket, because Tilbury Public Works, with the backhoe they have, uses it to load salt in the winter. If that backhoe permanently goes over to the South Water Crew, that backhoe is not going to be able to load salt for Tilbury Public Works. They have this tractor sitting there. If they had a little bigger one with a bucket, they could load salt with that. Okay. So the actual money we need is to upgrade that tractor, not to purchase the backhoe.
Okay. So on the basis of that information, the discussion that I heard from Councillor Sikachi, I'd like to move that we have two supplementary items here. One is the 140, which after great explanation, I'm not going to do anything with. Now I understand. The other is a supplementary item that one was a necessity and one is a need, but you can do without for a year. And next year, there will hopefully not be another supplementary and we can deal with the $75,000. So I'm going to move that it be removed for this year, and I hope to see it on the list next year.
Seconded by Councillor Sikachi.
Correct.
So we'll get that up on the screen, but Councillor Oche, you had a question, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, is that just the tractor, or does that include the annual life cycle cost?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So I believe it's another line right above it on your page. So the $75,000 is the supplementary ask to purchase that tractor one time. The $12,000 base budget is the annual life cycle to ongoing to pay for that tractor next time.
Right, sorry, Ryan. It was actually more to the mover on this, Council Solomon.
No, so thank you very much. You're right. We should take both lines out and it'll be 87.
Are you altering your motion to that?
No.
No.
Okay. No, I think if you leave as I understand it, if you leave the $12,000 in and put the 75, well, it won't be 75 next year. It'll be lower because you've got your life cycle that you can apply to it. Is that correct? Or should I take them both out?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. I think if you're going to pull the $75,000 this year, the 12, a lot of that 12 is also fuel and maintenance as well as offsetting the money. So it wouldn't be a full 12 that's kind of sitting in a pot to purchase the next time. So if you're going to pull the 75, the 12 can come out as well for this year.
Okay, so I amended to do that. Thank you. Thank you for your honesty.
Thomas?
Thank you. I sincerely appreciate Council's desire to reduce the tax base. My only concern on this one is that I came forward with a report on January 13th. We talked about close to 2,000 outstanding work orders. This, what Ryan indicated, was all about productivity as well, and getting to the site sooner. We get to the site sooner, we can get the job done faster, and we actually increase the capacity of the workforce that we have. So again, understand that the savings are there, but this will also help us to reduce our back order of work that we have to do.
Councillor Harrigan?
Thank you. In some ways, Thomas has already proactively answered my question, but just so that I understand, can you go into a bit more detail around the service requirements that are not being met because of this lack of equipment? Like, I understand if there's no, oh Lord, tractor with the backhoe in the south, which is Ward 2, then they've got to borrow it from Tilbury, so you're losing, you're paying extra gas for the mileage back and forth. You're losing the time that it takes to travel from one location to Tilbury and back again each day, which we do get quite a bit of emails about public works people driving to nowhere, right? But they're likely driving to go pick up a backhoe to go to a work site. But what are the service requirements? I usually leave the backhoe work to somebody else. So like, what is it that is not happening in terms of like, what are the service levels that are not being met?
So this
What
group,
areas?
yeah, thank you, Budget Chair. So this group is responsible for all of the maintenance of the water lines and any sanitary as well, south of the river. And I can tell you that when I first started in 2012, we had 4 people in this group. In my report, I mentioned every year our infrastructure gets a year older. Underground infrastructure is particularly challenging because you can't see it. It is also increasing, and we have now increased, through the support of the PUC, that group from 4 to now 6. When myself and the CIO were out at our divisional review, they told us and verified with work orders that they would like to go from 6 to 8, in fact. So it's just an indication of the growing maintenance requirements because of the age of our infrastructure.
So an example for, again, those of us around the table that don't work in this field would be like when the water main broke in my neck of the woods around Dashwell Drive and it flooded the road, and then they had to close the road to open it up and repair the veins, for lack of a better word. That would be an example of service that would be impacted negatively.
Yes, and you could just say it's a reflection of our customer service. So it allows us to get the job done faster, and we thought it was a good investment for council because it's less than a 4-year payback as well.
Yeah. So I can't support this because for me, infrastructure, and in particular underground infrastructure, is incredibly important. And if we don't have the tools to do the work that we needed by the people that we're adding to the staff, then people are just, I doubt this, but they're just twiddling their thumbs, for lack of I don't want to be critical of anybody. But we need to make sure that our engineering team has the tools and our public works group has the tools to do the work that's set out for them. And I think from a tax impact, because we are only on page 3, I think there are other areas we may be able to look at finding opportunities to reduce taxes, and this should not be one of them. So I won't be supporting this because I do think it's a good investment in improving the productivity of our municipal workers, which is sometimes put under scrutiny.
Councillor Latimer?
Thank you to the Budget Chair. Do you have a dollar figure with regard to the efficiency, not just the promotion of service, but how much money are you going to save in efficiencies to put towards the cost of this? Do you have a dollar figure? Because I too cannot support this. You need that tractor in Blenheim with a backhoe and your loader in Tilbury and their tractor. This is a good use of your current resources because you're outsourcing right for that backhoe in Blenheim when you don't have it right now, correct? Yes. So how much is that costing us? In other words, if we continue to do what we're doing right now over next year, how much is that going to cost us more or towards the cost of this offset?
They told us that.
Oh, did they? Oh, sorry.
Just while we're waiting for an answer, did I miss anyone's hand for a question on this item? No? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So to answer the question, we have those contractor fees so if this budget request isn't approved, we're still going to have this increase, this $20,000 in contractor fees that South Water is going to use because they're going to be contracting services of a backhoe more. The efficiencies and the timeliness are very hard to quantify in a dollar value, right? A water main break in the middle of the night, having it repaired an hour earlier means a lot to the person without water, but very hard to quantify in a dollar figure. And however, the other thing, we're always asked, and we're always trying to rationalize our fleet. And with this backhoe in Tilbury currently, its utilization is about like in the 30% range. And so by going to South Water, then that backhoe is going to be much higher utilization, and then now the tractor with the loader is going to have higher utilization. So it takes some money to get this all done, but at the end of the day, we would build that money back over time.
Yeah, you're going to save money, make the best use of our resources. And for that reason, I can't support this.
I'm going to call the vote. My only comment would be, sorry, Mayor Caniff? Go ahead.
To clarify, then, we will save $20,000 a year by purchasing this. And is that $20,000 savings coming from the operating budget or from capital budget?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So $20,000 is our out-of-pocket savings, and that comes from operations.
Okay, so then would it be appropriate then to propose a $20,000 cut to the budget? We're going to save 20 grand each year by putting this 140 in, because otherwise you're ending up with an extra 20,000 in the budget. Because then that to me would be fair. If there's going to be a savings, we would reflect the savings by this purchase.
Thank you, Budget Chair. I fully agree. The only thing I would remind Council is that we have some shortages as well on winter control on a regular basis on our salt budget as well. So what I would say is that we will be $20,000 further ahead at the end of the day that we can put to other operations. If you're asking me to now cut my budget $20,000, we can do that, but you'll see there's other items on the list here.
But those items, until they're cut, I guess they're, so you're just saying that be cognizant of other things?
Other things, other asks within the budget we haven't got to yet.
I really like the idea of linking, if we're going to invest money here and if there's a savings, to reflect both.
Yep, that's fine.
And all day long, we should invest to save money if it makes sense. But I just want to make sure that we link that and have that 20,000. So I'll put a motion forth that we reduce the operating budget by $20,000.
We'll vote on this one first, or we can do that.
That's it, yeah.
I'll withdraw my motion in favor of that.
You did have a seconder. I can't remember who it is now.
Well,
but
there's Anthony.
Oh, it was Anthony, yeah.
I mean, I'll withdraw mine in favor of that because I can tell you that in this massive 300 some odd million budget, I'm never going to remember to ask, nor is any one of us, will show me the $20,000 savings that you achieved. If we can do it right now, that's, yeah, and it helps everybody.
So
you get a backhoe that will move salt, apparently. And
so just to clarify, to get us moving, you're withdrawing this motion?
In favor of that one.
And you're going to make a motion.
And I'll second the mayor's motion when he brings it.
I have a totally different. People need to read the briefing.
Gord?
I sorry to jump in the middle of this, but people need to read the briefing note 49 because, again, this is mainly for the South Water crew. So it's this is where it gets extremely difficult very fast because a lot of this is for the South Water crew who bills all its time to the PUC when they're doing those water main breaks. So it does get really complicated just cutting $20,000 out of Thomas's budget. Some numbers have been thrown out, but I think yes, it'll be more efficient so you get to some of those backlog items. But I actually don't think there's savings. Yes, we're not hiring a contractor in. I get that. But that contractor was then being charged to the water bill that was charged to the PUC, right? Or the water work order.
So where does the ultimate? So
it's not tax dollars paying it.
So it's not tax. So it saves PUC dollars. Then does that help me here? Because there's got to be a savings somewhere. And if there's no dollar savings, then it's just more efficient.
They're more efficient, so they can get to all those backlog issues that they're not getting to now. Thomas and Brian need to confirm that, but that's how I'm reading it, and I just wanted to bring that up.
All right, I just to clarify, because we're making an economic decision here to say that we're going to spend 140 to save money or to quantify either qualitative or quantitative aspects of the investment. So if it's just
It's not the 140, it's the.
just qualitative aspects to say where it'll be better versus there's actual dollar savings.
Mayor Caniff, is your question, are they going to do the same work for less money, or are they going to do more work for the same amount of money?
Yes.
Is
so
that the?
If there's a dollar savings, because we just heard it was 20,000 savings on the backhoe, then where's that reflected? And if there is no savings and you're more efficient, you can do 12 jobs instead of 10. That's fine. There is no dollar savings, but you're effectively getting more done.
Yeah.
So the way I'm understanding it, the invoice from that contractor is being charged to a work order in Public Works, which is then being charged to the PUC because they were fixing a water main.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, yes, we're not paying a contractor anymore, so for the overall good, we're good, but it's actually saving to the PUC because we're not passing
so the
that
taxpayer is going to pay more, and the water rates are going to pay less because of this decision, effectively.
However, the increase of that 12,000 of rental charges for the annual life cycle costs will be recovered over the years from the PUC as well, because of the rental rate of the backhoe, because it's now our own backhoe versus outsourced. It gets extremely complicated very quickly.
But in effect, we boil it down to water. PUC is going to pay for this. We're up front. We're putting the cash up front. As a whole, as Councillor Solomon pointed out, taxpayer and the water payer are almost the same now. We save money collectively over the term.
Yeah,
or
I
be
think
more efficient.
It's extremely complicated.
Okay. So,
they will be more efficient, and just the staff time of Public Works, instead of waiting an hour for that contractor to show up, the backhoe's there.
Well, I'm fine if there's no saving. I'm not going to get into the weed anymore in the weeds on this. I was hoping there's going to be some clear savings to it. Thanks.
Okay, so I think we're at the point now where we'll keep, this motion's going to stay up. It's no longer withdrawn. Still seconded by Councillor Sakachi, and we'll vote on it. So I'm going to call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion fails 5-12.
Was there any more items on this page? We're going to go to the next page and then we'll take a break. Anything on page 4? Councillor Solomon.
Just keep banging my head against the wall. Item number 81. Is that the one, 81? Is that the one I wanted? Yes, 81. I move it be reduced to $75,000.
Do we have a second for that one? Councillor Pinsonneau? Councillor Pinsonneau, you want to speak on that one?
Yeah, that's responsible. We've had a pretty mild 2019, and I know Thomas isn't going to agree with us, but I think it's responsible.
Of course not.
Councillor Oche?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Thomas. Thomas, do you know where we stand right now for this year for salt control, what we've spent?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So we run by a calendar year. So this year it's been quite low. I can tell you that with the weather we're having, we are spending more on salt materials, less on plows, right? So we haven't got the final tallies from last year, but it will be favorable. If you look in the reserve, we have $3.2 million in the reserve as well. I have no concerns with the proposal, which I think just is trimming it. It's very similar to Councillor Harrigan's proposal on the life cycle, where you do less this year because of the downloading, and we'll try to pick it up maybe in future years. So I have no concerns with that.
Thank you.
Okay, so that should be reduced to 75,000, not 275. Okay. I'm about to call the question, but just one moment of clarity from Gord. So I just wanted a reminder of where this initial decision came from, what type of decision was made, so why we're still dealing with this. Maybe as a caution to how we make decisions at budget.
So in it's in the briefing note, but off the top of my head, about the 2013 budget, council cut $500,000 out of the salt budget without changing the level of service. So they said, buy the same amount of salt, don't change your level of services, but we're not going to fund the bill. So we're buying the salt anyway. Yes, this last month of January has been great. I'm sure we've saved some salt, but but overall, for since 2013, we spread the salt as per the regulations of, Thomas will tell you when we have to spread salt. So we're putting the same amount of salt in the road. We just don't have it. We're not budgeting to pay for it. And so at last year's council, we decided to phase it in over this term of council, the 500,000 shortfall again. So cutting this to 75,000 means we'll be adding it 200,000 in the next 2 years, because we still need to recover the 500,000.
Okay, so just to summarize that, maybe 2013 budget committee borrowed $500,000 from this budget committee to alleviate tax burden in 2013, and we're 7 years later. I'm still going to support this motion, but just wanted to point that out.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means that budget increase in salt. There's already millions in there, so wouldn't get too wired about $50,000, whatever the number is.
I'm going to call the question if that's okay.
Thomas didn't get wired about it, nobody's going to get wired about it.
I'm not wired about this one. I'm just making a point. I'll call the question.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Any other items on this page? Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. The quickest of questions, because it is such a small budget item, number 82. The comment made that the increase in cost of grass cutting for cemeteries previously cut privately. Are we cutting that grass publicly now because we didn't have anybody respond to it?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So the issue was that we used to have a number of parcels cut privately. They didn't have all the proper insurance, the training, there was risk to that. So we worked very closely with our legal team, and we issued an RFP or a tender, and now we have contractors who have all of the safety requirements and all of the coverage that's required. That was the increased cost to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Oche on this page as well?
Yes, sir. Thomas, number 83, Stone Orchard Cemetery software shortfall. What does that mean?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So Council authorized us to purchase Stone Orchard Cemetery software. I believe it was last year, and through working with our IT group, it was determined that we needed an additional server to support that software. So that's the cost to do that. That particular software manages all of our entire cemetery, all the plots, all the details associated with our operations.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Crew.
Thank you. On line 84, just an explanation. It says reduced interest from trust for cemetery operations. Who's that?
Jeff.
Probably, yeah.
Thank you, Budget Chair. Gord, you may be able to assist with this as well. This is annually we receive funds from the trust from I'm having a moment here. When people
Family.
pay their interment fees for perpetual care, so over the years, the trust amounts that were coming in are not as much as we had anticipated, so this makes up the shortfall.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Seeing no more questions on this page, we're going to take a break until 8:15. back to our seats. Hopefully. So we're still on page 5, tab 6. Councillor Latimer. Page 5, I think.
Page 5.
Yeah.
Thank you. Through the budget chair, I'd like to make a motion to remove line 95. Provision for wage benchmarking.
Okay. This would be a good time to ask if there's any pecuniary interest. Any pecuniary interest for tonight? Councillor Pincinel?
I have one on that one, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Caniff? Or Mayor Caniff, sorry. You're sitting in your old seat.
I've been called worse. I declared pecuniary interest as well.
Yeah, and I'll declare one as well. Councillor McGregor, if you could take the chair.
Okay, and did we have a seconder? I don't know if we had one. No?
No.
You're not? Okay. Councillor Finn. Comments? Or sorry, Claire, that was yours. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you to the chair. I've already talked to Ms. Hoffman about this, and I recognize that it's important that we start planning for this, but this year, I think we're going to give it a bye. Because we have given the provisions for your staffing that you want, and albeit you've looked in your budgets and reorganized and found internal efficiencies. And I think we have done, to the best of our ability, provided the new equipment that people want. So I'm hoping that the rest of the horseshoe supports me on this year. But we do need to look at it for next year. We have to start somewhere.
Would anybody, and I know we've had a lot of chit-chat around amongst us, would anybody be opposed if I called the question? Okay, let's call the question.
Right.
All votes are in. Motion passes 13-1.
Yes. Okay, and I kind of going to stab at this. Back to line 48, where we have the $140,000 service vehicle. I'd like to make a motion that we take that out of the strategic reserves.
Do you have a second for that motion? Councillor Hall? Councillor Oche, followed by Councillor Harrigan. Sakachi, I'm sorry. You look nothing alike too, I'm sorry. Councillor Sakachi, you can go first for that, yeah.
Just actually one quick question for Mr. Quinton. Just want to ensure, because I know that we've did some adjusting with that funds. There is substantial funds for that expenditure.
So last night, council put 1.5 million into it at the beginning of the night, replenishing the strategic reserve. Since then, we've purchased the fire equipment that was approximately 700,000 out of it. So there still remains 800,000 there. That this could take another 140.
Quick comment. Can I support this?
Councillor Harrigan?
Just a question on the reserve type. Is that the right reserve, or is there another reserve that's more connected to public works or infrastructure and engineering that might be more suitable?
So the only other reserve that's connected to public works directly is the winter control reserve. So I'll leave that to
That's all right.
the mover if they would like to change it.
Nope, that's okay. That's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Finn?
I just have one question. Is this the same reserve that we just said that if there was a need for expansions, that money would come out?
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-1.
Okay, so we'll get an update on that, on the number we're at here shortly. Other items on page 5. Councillor Harrigan?
Just a quick question about item number 106 regarding the master fire plan for CK through to Chief Case, through you, Mr. Chair. Is the cost for this because it is needing to be third party done, like done by a third party, or is it a cost to time because we're reallocating firefighter work to doing the plan? We have to backfill those firefighters.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this would be a third-party consultant brought in with specialist knowledge of how to write master fire plans.
Okay, and then in the briefing note, it notes that we are going to be planning to do this once every 10 years. Is there, I don't think I see any allocation towards putting $10,000 into the budget every year so that we can not have this supplemental item. Is that correct? Sorry to add, but does it make sense to add $10,000 into our base budget so that we can plan if we are doing this every 10 years? Or is it because it's only $100,000, it's fine to be a supplemental item?
So, thank you, Budget Chair. There are a lot of master plans that could be done across the municipality. You know, library master plans, recreation master plans, fire. We haven't built life cycles to fund those. They've come up whenever they're ready. So it's consistent with the other master plans.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGregor?
Just out of curiosity, I've been on a couple of committees that have worked on and developed master plans. Are you confident that you can do this within the next year, or like hiring somebody, they can take this on and accomplishment? You've got a very big department and it hasn't been done from what I can see here, and since 2006 was the last one, so.
Through you, Chair. We're confident that the plan would take between 6 to 12 months to complete if it was given to an outsource but the plan would involve community consultation, speaking to staff, speaking to council members. So one of the reasons why we've looked to outsource this is to make it done as quickly as possible in the most effective way.
Thank you.
Councillor Solomon, followed by Councillor Oche.
I'll try one again. Don't know why. I'm looking at line 105, and it doesn't have a briefing note. So we have a strategic planning seminar, meeting, whatever, at the beginning of each term. Okay? We put $7,500 in a year, so I take it that means we spend we're budgeting $30,000 for that strategic planning meeting?
Thank you. The cost of doing the strategic planning at $30,000 is a contribution every year, so that at least once every 4 years we'd be able to engage someone like we did with Strategy Corp. Their bill this year was about $22,000. The balance of that money, which would be about $8,000 over the course of the 4 years, would pay for the additional costs of doing things like the planning we just did with the growth group or the growth discussions. So that would have some incremental costs, but the bulk of that, $22,000 to $25,000, would be expected to do once every 4 years if we hired an external consultant. We used to have that done by internal staff. That's now been absorbed as part of the CEO regular duties, and once every 4 years we think there's a benefit to bring in some external consultants. So
yeah,
we actually cut back on a staff person.
Okay, well that answers my question. That's good detail, because I wanted to know how much we paid the group that we had here. So, okay.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Chair. To Chief Case or John, I'm not sure. Sorry, 108 and 109. Just reading your briefing notes, 109. I understand the life cycle because that's something brand new that we don't have right now. So I do understand that. It says allocate funds to purchase one additional sport vehicle for the training and, or no, sorry, above that one. Oh, allocate funds to upgrade the existing replaceable support vehicles to a standard 4x4 crew cab. What would that vehicle be used for?
Through you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Chair, I missed the last part of your question.
Okay, it says allocate funds to upgrade the existing replaceable support vehicles to a standard 4x4 crew cab. What would that be used for?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for your question, and it's a good question. We have vehicles that we use for fire inspectors, for training officers, and for community fire safety work. And that's a mix of vehicles that are not being replaced. We have some ex-ambulance vehicles that we use, and we also have a mix of vehicles that have been donated, and none of these can be used for operational purposes. So in the event of a large incident, what we're trying to do is to rationalise the fleet so that they can be used for day-to-day work to make sure the inspectors go out and do the inspections. And in the event of a large incident, such as a flood or such as a large fire, we can then bring those vehicles in and begin to use them for fire and rescue purposes.
Okay. So I guess I'm having a problem with it. Why a 4x4? Will we be pulling a trailer or anything like that?
Through you, Chair. Yes, we do have a number of vehicles that we use with trailers. We have boats, we have all-terrain vehicles, and we have some trailer usage that we'd use to make sure we can get the right resource to the incident in the shortest possible time. It's a lot more cost-effective than having it on a heavy fleet vehicle. We keep it sat at Station 1 on a trailer, and it's available to go if required.
Okay, thank you. And then just my next question through you, the Chair. I believe I may have missed the ambulance price, so if I could ask, how are we doing with the ambulance now? Luckily this year, since we put the last shift on, I haven't had many messages at all, but I know some people have, so I'm just wondering where we sit compared to this time last year.
In terms of, are we talking about ambulance performance, or are we?
Yeah, I know up until we put that other shift on, we were having 45-minute waits for people to be picked up. Had someone contact me at Richtown. Why is Tilbury ambulance picking up in Richtown? And that's because Richtown was out to another call, of course, but I'm just wondering how we are with that now.
Through you, Chair. One of the first actions I've done as Chief is to do a review of that, and I intend to bring a performance report to Council in March, which will explain where we are in terms of ambulance performance.
Great, that's what I'd like to hear. Thank you.
Other items on this page? Just for update, we're at 297 right now. So I'll take anything from page 6 or 7. Councillor Kirkwood-White. It's a half a page. So
thank you, Budget Chair. Through you to April, item number 114. Just a clarification. I was a tad concerned when I saw that the All for Kids coordinator had been reduced to half-time. And I don't want to get into the administrative weeds, but I understand that the alignments, the adjustments have been made to accommodate the navigators from the library now in base that were in supplementary last year. Is that right? Okay. And as far as the people or the positions that have been eliminated, have we lost people?
Through Budget Chair. So I'm going to piece those questions out, if that's okay. So if we start with All for Kids. So I did send an email out to Council shortly before the meeting, so I appreciate that a number of you may not have had the opportunity to look at that. We have done some work internally in terms of looking at cutting red tape around how parents access the fund, how we work with both our community groups. So the programs and services available for children and youth will not change. So those stay exactly the same. What this has done has been able to administer the program with less staff, so it can now be administered in a more efficient way. So that's that one piece. So no changes in terms of program, just changes in terms of less red tape. What we have done is we've looked at realigning staff in a way to better service where the highest needs are. So when we look at our community outreach, when we look at our housing and homelessness issues in the community, we really feel that this realignment of staff will meet those demands in the best way possible. All of our realignment through the year are done through attrition, and to the point that sometimes we hold off even hiring until we figure out how we're going to realign things. So certainly we look at moving and shifting in terms of skills of all of our staff to make sure that in this type of realignment, they're not negatively impacted for that. And there was something else in there and I can't remember.
I guess I'm concerned about people that were in positions before this, and are they still here full time?
So the one individual that in All for Kids specifically, she is still here and will continue to work here and will continue to work through this change of the All for Kids program. And then her skills and abilities as we shuffle around will be taken into account and will accommodate that.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Councillor Pincinel.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Line item 127, I would move that be removed from this budget. If I get a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Councillor Solomon. Go ahead, Councillor Pincinel.
We're putting money away. I'm assuming this is for some sort of a life cycle for a project that we don't even know if it is going to go forward. And now they're saying that they're not going to hear about the upper levels of government funding till probably later on into the year. So I think this is a moot point, and it should be removed.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Harrigan.
Just a comment. It's my understanding that if we do not move forward, get funding for the new multi-sport complex or twin pad arena, our current arenas, especially those in Chatham, have significant upgrades that we would need to attend to. Is that correct?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So if we do not get the funding, we will come back with a report to this council with some recommendations because we'll have to make some significant decisions, especially with Memorial Arena. It's very similar to what we did out in Wallaceburg. We're going to have to decide if we wish to upgrade that facility. So that is not covered in life cycle whatsoever.
Right. So for that reason, I think it's important to keep this in. We know that we've got some potential big spends for our arenas, and that's not even including all of the other arenas across the community that have their continued life cycle. As those buildings age, we may have to put more into them. So, I think there's a balance that we have to have, and we shouldn't necessarily be trying to chase zero at the expense of putting money away for savings, whether it's recreational facilities or infrastructure.
Councillor Bondi.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll support this because I understand, Councillor Harrigan, what you're saying, but we did set aside $18 million, right? So, there's lots of money if we end up renovating Memorial. So an extra 110 won't really make a big difference in that, kind of not much of a big difference in today's budget either, but there is a big pile of money set aside for the potential new development, which may never happen if we don't get the funding. So I'll support this. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'll make a few. I agree with Councillor Harrigan. I think that there's a recognition in the community that if the sports complex doesn't get provincial and federal funding, we're not moving forward. There's a very real need in a number of our arenas for upgrades. And we all know that it's much more difficult to make a decision when you don't have any money put away. And I think this is the most prudent thing we can do. Frankly, we probably should be putting away more, understanding building inflation and the very real need that's there. So I won't be supporting this one, and I hope we'll continue to put money away for these projects. With that, I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion fails 8-9.
Councillor Oche, followed by Councillor Harrigan. Did you have another one, Councillor Oche? Might be looking at the wrong list now. Councillor Harrigan.
Got to scratch your list out. I have a question regarding number 118, regarding council and the increase to the council or conference budget. It's only $15,000, but through the chair, is the reason for this budget increase request due to the increase of things like gas and train tickets and mileage and hotels, or is it because council as a whole is attending more conferences?
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So there are 3 reasons that I've outlined. So first of all, in previous years, when we had targets, when we looked at council targets between honorariums and cell phones and other things like that, it always seemed to go to the conference line is where we would take the targets from when they were approved. And then in addition, over the years, we've had increased costs to mileage, to accommodations, to registrations for those conferences, and no money has ever been allocated towards those lines in a very long time. And then lastly, we are finding that there is an increase in attendance with this term of council versus previous council. So that for all of those reasons, that's why we're asking for more.
So something that I would like to see, so I'm fine, it's $15,000, so it's a very low amount, but I would like to see a report back to council around conference attendance and the trajectory of conference attendance. I think, and I've said this before, there's a current process where there's a lot of autonomy between councillors in terms of which conferences you're going to go to and not, and I think that should be more of a group conversation. I don't feel right about attending 3 or 2 conferences a year. I think if councillors are attending 1 conference a year, and then maybe based on special interests or priorities in their ward or in their area, we could talk about more. So I think if we're, cutting from our departments, we should also think about making sure that when we're attending a conference, we have that purpose and it is meaningful, and it's not just because we can.
Right. So just in response to that, annually, the finance department brings back a report with all of the costs that committees and then council in their budgets and what has happened there. So that will be coming. And if in addition to that information you would like more specifics, we can definitely provide an information report on that. And the amount of the $15,000 is $880 per councillor line.
Okay, thank you.
Don?
The offsetting side of the equation, I'm quite happy with the request, and we'll definitely bring back the report. But the offset is the types of returns that councils enjoy. There's certainly a professional development element to it, but I think every time we're going to a Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference or one of these other events, we're meeting with provincial government members, there's also been substantial monies or support that we've received, and if we are not present in some of those things or we don't have sufficient representation, we're not as likely to get the funds. So with council's indulgence, I'd like to be able to highlight some of the activities that have been heard or the issues that have been heard by provincial government and what some of that return on the investment has been. And I know it's a little dangerous to do that because there's no direct line that says you went there and then you get the money. But when you do go and lobby for it, I think there's an important piece. And I know our media has been really good about reporting on some of those activities as well. So with that, I'll leave it, but I allow us that latitude as well, because I think it's important for the taxpayers to know that this is they're not junkets. We're going there. People are working and they're learning and they're bringing some valuable things back to Chatham-Kent, and often it's lots of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
On this item? Okay, Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, and I would just add too, and I know that it'll probably come back in a report. There are some of us around the table that are taking on extra council responsibilities. I myself with Alpha, and we've got Jamie down here with Swift, and well, the mayor I guess doesn't count, but we have different people around that are, well, he counts, but you have to attend so much more than the rest of us. So, there are some other people that have decided to contribute more time to try and help our municipality by being as representatives on the other board, which will show in these reports too. So, I know you say one conference, that's probably easy. Have you attended a conference?
No, I haven't.
So
I'll
you
be
wouldn't
attending my
understand the
first
benefit.
conference.
You wouldn't understand the benefit.
No.
Maybe of that
I'm not
conference
saying.
and the
I don't
multiple
see the.
conferences, So,
Yes.
but I think it would be good for a report to come back so that there is maybe a better understanding. We have Councillor Foz here, who's on St. Conservation Authority, and I know you get some of that there. But you use these other trips in AMO to be able to meet, as he met with an MP during an AMO conference and doing that. So it's all. I think we all go down with the look of trying to work to bring not only to get education, but to be able to make sure that we're well represented across the province in many different areas.
Councillor Foss?
I don't want to prolong the night too, but I think it's an important topic because of the fact that I can remember one or two only going to conferences, and the mileage that we get out by going and by visiting with the ministers, and I would say 90% of the time by visiting with those ministers, we come back not that day, but throughout the year, the amount of money that we get because we approach the minister on that. And if you go, you'll understand that the government really doesn't have a clue as to what's going on here unless we go and sit down face to face and say, this is what Chatham-Kent needs. And most of the time they're puzzled and say, we didn't realize that. Some of the ministers haven't even been to Chatham-Kent. They don't know our geographics. They don't know our concerns. But by going there, they know it. And they get to know you. And if you can be face-to-face with a minister or other government employees, you build a relationship so that you can feel comfortable in calling and say, we have an issue here, and they respond. So I don't think you can put a dollar value on it. So,
Mayor Caniff?
20 seconds. I just want to say they fund us over $160 million a year in our base budget, and they provide millions of dollars a year in grants. We got to get in their family. I echo everything that's been said. It's so important. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And if they've never seen us, it's a lot easier to say no. I don't think we're going to give them money versus knowing us. So it's very imperative. Thanks.
Agreed, and I think it's good that we'll have open and transparent conversation about that in council. I would echo what Councillor Foss says and just add that when you're there, everyone else is there too. So other councils, I would argue, probably send people at a lot higher rate than we do. And some councils send every councillor to every conference, and essentially you're competing with them for that attention. So we'll move on to other items on this page. If ever on this item, anyone else? No? Okay. So I've got Councillor Latimer next.
Thank you, through the budget chair. Just two items. One, line 133, and I don't know if I should have brought this to Chief Khan's attention. It's $20,000 additional training for taser use and officer protection safety. Is there a reason that's in our budget and not the police budget? I don't know. There's no briefing note.
Yeah. So for all the police items, they're detailed in here, but you've already approved the police budget.
So that's part of that?
So yeah. So this is just summing up all the items, but you've already approved that when you approved the police budget yesterday.
Okay. I apologize. It's good.
Councillor Pinsnow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to try something again here. On the capital budget, number 12, I'd like to break that into two phases.
Sorry, 1 second. Are you back to the capital budget?
Yes.
So we're just going to wait until we get through these page 6 and 7.
Okay.
And then through tab 7 if there's anything, tab 8 if there's anything, and then we'll do sort of the general motions from the floor that move back. Remind me, I might forget where I wrote your name to. Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Thomas. Thomas, the number 129, additional building costs support the Dillon Road facility. Do we not have life cycle on that?
So again, that's a police item.
Yes, police item.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Any other items on page 6 or 7? Councillor Sakachi?
Sorry, through you, the chair. I was trying to follow up with April on Councillor Kirkwood White's comments. So just the item, the tab number 114. So I just wanted to touch base on that because I did have a request from somebody who has utilized the All for Kids program, and they really couldn't speak highly enough of it. And they give me a really good rundown of what it did in the first 9 months in regards to, basically how they're, partaking in activities with their peers and friends. So I just want to make sure with that I know that you really touched on it, but there is going to be no fundamental service changes to that, because that's very important to me. I don't want to, for items like this, for that amount of money, I don't want to cut a program like this.
So through you, Budget Chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Sakachi. So as I indicated in my email to Council,
Yes.
which I'll repeat here, we are very proud of this program. It's a program that we really do cherish. Having said that, this is not a ministry mandated program. This is something that Chatham-Kent has come together to ensure that our children and our youth have access to low-cost, no-cost recreation and cultural activities. So as long as we continue to receive donations and we have the funding there, we will get all of that funding out. So the changes that we are talking about within this shuffle is literally the administration piece of it. Okay. So the program piece is, while we have the funds, we will continue to get all those funds out. We have just cut the red tape of what parents have to go through to get the funds. Does that help?
Your email was very helpful as well. It's just that there was a couple of email exchanges that I've had with the constituent, and so it was very important that I was very clear, on that item, because obviously we're here to advocate for them, and I just want to reiterate what you said. I've heard nothing but wonderful things about that program. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Any other items on page 6 or 7, tab 6? Seeing none, tab 7. Anything from either of those pages? That's other funding available recommended. Okay. Seeing none, we'll go to tab 8, items not recommended. Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the January 13th meeting, I believe, we received a report from Thomas's group about service levels and the backlog of services that aren't being met. In that report, he indicated that he needed about $700,000 to catch up on that backlog. Those are things like trees being trimmed and sidewalks and all of those things that we get the complaints about, and then we call in, and what we end up doing, trying to do our work, is bumping up over other people and making that list even longer. So, Thomas, so I'm going to make a motion that we fund this $700,000 one time only from the winter reserve, am I saying it right? The winter reserve, and it is line 93, I believe, line 62, the winter control reserve. So I've spoke to, I guess I need a seconder before I keep
Second by Councillor Latimer.
Thank you. So Thomas, could you explain how this will help, and it's a one-time only, and how this will help get that backlog taken care of?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So the report, we talked about really a three-pronged approach. One was the process itself, and that's something that really doesn't cost anything. So we're working internally on our process. We're teaming up with our customer service group to see what we can do better, managing all these requests. The other one is just the $700K We looked at all the outstanding work orders that we have. It's close to 2,000. And as Councillor Crew mentioned, it's a variety of things. Right now, the way we manage our operations is that we do not authorize overtime unless it's absolutely mandatory for emergencies, for example, snow, ice, anything like that, anything to meet the minimum maintenance standards. So we do what we can during that time period, but we do not authorize overtime to just clear out our backlog. So what these funds will do will give us the flexibility to look at a variety of ways to resolve and really take a big, to remove a lot of these outstanding work orders, is that we will authorize some overtime on internal staff. We will also outsource where we can to get the work done. And some of the work has been, some of our residents have been waiting quite some time for this work. We are staffed only right now to just really manage the key elements, the key safety issues, the key emergencies. Over the last, since I've been here, we haven't increased a single person in public works at all. That's where the majority of the issues reside. At the same time, we're still continuing to see an increase, and it's primarily driven from the fact that we're only 50% funded on our infrastructure. So our maintenance costs every year, the assets are getting older, so they have to be repaired more often. So this $700,000 will allow us to take a big bite out of that outstanding work order. So you'll see it go down. My thought would be at the end of the year, we'll give you another report, tell you where we're at, and we can make a determination if it's just a one-time event or, you know, we may consider something longer term as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And the reason that I would like to get this done because one of our priorities is customer service. We're a service provider, and we need to provide good customer service for the people that are calling. And you shouldn't have to wait a year or two to get a tree trimmed or your sidewalk fixed or whatever the case may be. And this allows a mix of services from their department, Public Works, and everything else that is encompassed under there. And Thomas didn't touch on this, but a lot of this backlog also is created by the climate issues we've been facing. We're surrounded by water. I don't know how many floods you've responded to, the shoreline issues. So when all of our staff are attending to those emergencies, they're still not getting to those sidewalks and trees and things that the everyday citizen finds important. So this is a one-time thing. I don't like funding from reserves, but I think that, you know, this is a year that things are tough, but these are things that people expect of us. You know, in the summertime or in spring, they're not going to worry that we were really frugal and cut everything. They're still going to want that tree cut in a reasonable time or safety issues taken care of rather quickly. So that's my motion. I hope you support it, and thank you.
Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I don't have a problem supporting this if this is what Public Works wants, but you were talking about the winter budget. How's this going to affect your, I know we have a milder year this year. Do you think this year is the right year to do this? Out of the winter budget? Or out of the winter reserve?
Yeah. Thank you, Budget Chair. I'd say the conditions are very good right now. So we have $3.2 million in the reserve. And once we get past January 30th, and January 20th is usually the coldest and worst conditions, we just need to get through February and March. Again, we do it on an annual basis, so what's going to happen in November, December is another thing. But it would be, I think, at a guess, it would be, I think, favorable to try it at this time, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I got two more. Councillor Latimer and followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, through the Budget Chair. Mr. Kelly, can you reassure me and the public that with the use of the new software system or the improvement in the client service request process, that we won't be seeing this type of backlog in the future once we get these cleaned up, that the process in itself will speed things through or streamline it, and the fact that maybe if all of us follow proper protocol in using that system and we encourage the public to use the system appropriately, Are you feeling that we're not going to have a backlog next year we're going to have to manage after we get this cleaned up?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So a big part of our budget is really winter control. And if we have bad winters, I can't guarantee you that. Right now, in our condition that we have, we are still doing a lot of salting, but not so much snow clearing, as you know. So we do have some additional capacity, so we're working away at those outstanding 2,000. But my concern is, the answer is really no. I think this is going to be a long-term issue. Again, we have not increased staff in over 20 years in Public Works, and we're in a situation where all of our assets continue to age. And unfortunately, although we are improving our infrastructure funding, we're not doing so fast enough. So, for example, I have 50% of all of our assets that we're just doing maintenance on, just holding things together. So every year they get older, they get, the condition deteriorates. So I truly believe this will be an ongoing problem. What that software and working together better will do is that we are optimizing and ensuring that we're always working on the top priority items, always. And that's very important. We want to work closely with council and residents. And what happens is that anytime you call something in, that becomes our number one priority. You're the boss, and we're going to follow up on that. And what happens is that we start working on things which aren't as high a priority as that are in the queue right now. So that's why I really ask for your support to do that. You've seen all of my emails back to you, and they go to CK Info and asking you to use one database. I gave an example. We have 7 different ways of getting information into the system. We're trying to minimize that as well to avoid duplication and, even that council form that is used by the public. You've seen it. You'll have 4 or 5 different councillors tracking one event. It's not efficient. So we have lots of opportunities to improve internally, and that's going to help us. One of the things that we're trying to do with our customer service group is that a lot of those calls from residents used to go to our operations people. And what that did, again, that became the number one priority, and it took them away from the work that they should be doing. So we're trying to increase the education and the responsiveness of the upfront resources so that our operations people can continue to work on operations. So all of these things together, I think, is going to make a big improvement. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan?
Just a question, because I can't recall from the original briefing note, which was quite extensive in outlining all the problems, how it would be that you would report your progress back. Because I guess I'm very supportive of this motion. If in 6 months from now we haven't made too much headway in the backlog, because as we're trying to catch up to the backlog, more tickets are coming through, right? So it's not like we can stop today and just catch up. So could we see something in maybe 6 months, or even just, I guess, not necessarily formally through a RTC, but even a report on how things are? Because if this can't catch us up in this fiscal year, then we've got a bigger problem on our hands.
Thank you, Budget Chair. So that was our intent, that we would come in the fall, and we need some time to organize and get this work together with the funding. But we would come before the next budget cycle to let you know how it's worked out. And Councillor Crew made a very good point, is that anytime you hear about these Erie Shore Drive issues, Rose Beach Line, Thames River, Sydenham, we stop everything we're doing and we focus all resources on the emergency. So that means, as you say, they keep coming in and the backlog increases. So it's been a really difficult 2 years for us in particular.
Yeah. So do you anticipate the majority of this funding then going towards, say, 1, funding overtime, or 2, giving part-time or casual staff more hours than what their minimum hour allocation is, so that when there is an Erie Shore Drive fiasco, you can call in people to continue with the broken sign on whatever road?
So when we did the analysis of the outstanding top issues, it was even catch basin maintenance, grass cutting, all of the road issues we have, sidewalk maintenance, some traffic, trees, they're all out there. I would, if approved, I would sit down with my Director of Public Works, Ryan Brown, and we'll figure out, again, prioritizing the top issues and determining it'll be a combination of internal and external, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no more questions, I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-1.
Okay, so we're through the binder. So now I'll take motions from the floor, and I had Councillor Pinsnow as the first one.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So in the capital budget, item 12, I'd like to remove $700,000 from the base budget and push it over till next year. And if I get a seconder, I'll explain why.
Second by Councillor Wright.
Okay, so right now there's 2.4 million in that reserve. This is going to add another 700,000, which will bring that up to 3.1 million. And basically, by the time they need the other 700,000, it's going to be our next capital budget anyway.
Sorry, Councillor Pinsnow, can you? I missed the line.
Line 12 in the capital budget.
And what was the start of the motion? Sorry.
I want to remove 700,000 from this out of base.
From the base capital budget?
That's correct, and make it 2 phases instead of doing it all right now. So it'll be 700 this year, 700 next year. What that does is it puts 3.1 million in that reserve, which is a real good head start. They're not going to need that 700,000 this year anyway. And by next year when it's in there, it should work out just about right.
Councillor Latimer, question?
Thanks for the chair. Mr. Kelly, I think it's you or Mr. Bray. My understanding is that if we divide this project up, we increase the cost with regard to the tender efficiencies and the contractor efficiencies from the contractor's point of view. That's what we have been told. Is that correct? Am I understanding correctly? I think I am.
Thank you, Budget Chair. So I've had discussions with some of our contractors, and the proposal that's on the table, what we're asking for is 1.4 million. We already have close to $3 million already put away, and we have on the books right now, this proposal, we would have 83% of the funding. So we're $700,000 short to finish it off. So that's not going to be efficient at all. We're going to go out and tender 83% of all the work that needs to be done, and we're going to leave that last 17% to be completed. You don't get any efficiencies like that. A big cost in this work is mobilization. You get your crews out there, you have to get all your materials, all your supplies, and it's not a huge job. It's 21 kilometers in total, and every contractor I've talked to would just like to come out and finish it and get it done.
I think for that reason, I cannot support that. I know where you're coming from, but just from a contractor's point of view, and for 21 kilometers and the amount of work that has to go to bring in, for them to quote within what we want them to quote to do the work, I think Thomas is correct. And I think we need to follow the advice of this particular department in this area this time.
And I agree. Just for clarity, that's a 700,000 base budget to capital change. So that's talking about this project this year, but that's talking about a different project next year, a different project the year after, a different project the year after. So you look at that long list of projects, and that just puts you further behind in biting into capital. So for that reason, I can't support it either. Any other comments on this motion? Questions? Clarity? I'll call the question.
Councillor Oche? Thank you. All votes are in. Motion fails 5-12.
Councillor Oche, did you have another motion from the floor?
I do, Chair. and I'm not sure if this is the right time or if I can even do this here, but I was going to save it till after, but sometimes things get rushed, and then
this could be the last chance. This is motions from the floor, so this can be motions on anything for budget. So you're at the right time for sure.
Can this be a motion for next budget? Can we set?
Try it out.
Can we set a number of 3% to bring the budget to us at, unless we have more provincial downloads?
So you in an open council. So typically we've given that motion in the spring and tasked administration with inflation plus the AMP number. So I would plan to bring a motion like that in the spring anyway. We can discuss that, but that would be a council motion.
Okay, thank you.
Council. Yeah, are we still 297? 297, Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we've done an admirable job in getting it down from 4.99 to 2.97. So I'd like to make a motion that we accept the budget at 2.97.
Seconded by Councillor McGregor. Any discussion, questions on that, Councillor Solomon?
Yes, I have a question through you to Mr. Quinton. So, and maybe this is something that the public should understand, and I hope everybody around the horseshoe does, but I can tell you over the last 20 years, most councillors didn't seem to understand it, because they uttered this crazy phrase that if you get zero budget, then that means that you're not moving forward and you haven't had more spending. So in your report, Mr. Quinton, I saw that we have and this is great, because most years we haven't had high assessment increases, but this year we have. So when I first asked you about this a couple weeks ago, the budget was at 3.9, whatever it was, 3.949, whatever it was. That's the tax increase. However, our spending increase is different than that. So I understand, and I hope everybody around here understands, that our spending increase at that number was more in, what did you give me, 6 point? I've got it here somewhere, but you've probably got it even more handy.
Yeah, so I think what you're asking is the assessment growth itself was 2.4 million, which represents 1.55%.
Right. So year to year, if you talked about the spending increase, it would be 6 point.
Yeah, so we started at 6.54 if you back out the assessment.
Right.
So we're now at 2.97 of a new tax is needed for the budget.
Right. So my question is,
and we're getting 1.55% from the new buildings that were built last year.
So that's so everybody understands. And I would just like to flush those past crazy ideas that if you had a zero increase or you had a 1 increase, that you weren't increasing your spending. In fact, you are. And what Mr. Quinton just told you is that at the 3.49 tax increase, the municipal corporation spending went up year to year 6.54. 6.54%. Okay? So you should understand that. So when the public and people watching, if they even are at this point, should understand that we were increasing our spending here by 6.54%. Now, we've now reduced the budget to 2.97. So you know what my next question is. What is the spending increase that's the equivalent of 6.54?
So we have a 2.97 of a tax increase plus 1.55 that's coming from the new assessment. So it's an increase of 4.52. However, there's always on all the numbers, there's always a combinations of money in and out for the province, and some things are subsidized, but from those two numbers, we're at 4.52.
Everything else being equal. And so if everything could go the way I'd like it to go, and probably you're planning, you'd be able to cover spending by the increase in assessment activity and growth in the community. And that's what we are unfortunate maybe geographically unfortunate being so far from the center of the universe in Toronto, because we have not had that growth year to year to year to year in the past 20 years. This year has been very, very positive in assessment growth.
Inflation.
But no one should, when you pass this budget, if you do, bear in mind, and the public should hear, and they should bear in mind that the spending increase year to year is 4.52, correct? Subject to about 20 contingencies, I'm sure. But.
Yeah. I understood what you're saying. I just wanted to get maybe Don to respond to that particular question.
So Councillor Sullivan's correct, as the spending has gone up significantly. And as we talked about with council in a breakaway session on growth strategy, that's what he's proposing is exactly what I think all of council landed on, is we need to have a growth strategy that's going to drive up our assessment growth so that we can actually keep a cap on taxes. That's absolutely correct. I'd also like to point out, in deference to the team that prepared the budget and council's efforts to adjust it to make it what's appropriate for our community, our assessment growth was 1.6%. Our inflation rate was 1.9%. We actually came in terms of the same level of services that we had last year. We actually have found efficiencies to actually come in under the rate of inflation. The major factors that drew that budget that was proposed to council at 4.99% was a 2.74% recommended investment in our infrastructure, and we've talked about that being a $50 million deficit. So we're trying to play catch up, and we're not going to do it in 1 year. The council's had a very measured approach to that. We've also had a 1.5% download from the province. So I think everything that Councillor Solomon said is fair, and administration is absolutely on side with trying to drive up the assessment growth. But I think we're doing our administration team and council a disservice if people don't realize that we've actually still been driving efficiencies. We come in under the rate of inflation, and it's those other factors that we've had to try and find a way to manage. And I think council's done a great job getting to the point they have with this year. But we have beat inflation, and that's happened for several years with driving efficiency. So that wasn't due to the lack of a whole lot of effort on the part of the team, and I want to thank them for that.
So since I still have the floor, I hope everybody understands what my point was. My point is that I want to drive a stake through the heart of those comments that we used to hear, that if you don't raise taxes, you're not doing sufficient spending. We are spending 4.52 if you pass this budget. That's what I wanted to drive home. They were wrong then and they're wrong now. And the important thing is that the way to become a successful community is to increase your assessment, not increase your taxes. That's the whole point. And that's what we've got to drive forward with. I'm not, for all these years I've been saying, don't increase the taxes, increase the assessment, and let the assessment pay for the expenses. This is one of the first years that we've had some good assessment. But let's not, out there in TV land, think that we're only increasing our expenses by 2.97%. We're not. We're having spending beyond that, and everybody can decide whether it's healthy, not healthy, all the hard work that was done. Everybody can have their own opinion on that, but they at least should know if you pass this budget, you didn't increase your spending by 2.9%. You increased it by 5.2%. And I just wanted to do that because there's been a point of confusion year after year after year. And I checked with Mr. Quinton 2 weeks ago to make sure that this is nothing coming before him that he didn't already know. And yeah, there may be tweaks and changes from the province. We've seen that for 38 years. And all different governments.
So you're absolutely correct. It is that amount. And if you just think about the size of the municipality, just our inflation alone, not inflation on wages, but inflation on all the things we buy, was $2.5 million. So the keys to future financial success of this municipality is exactly what you said: increased assessment growth. And if I can add another one, is to start thinking about having growth pay for growth with development charges, so that new roads and storm sewers and storm management ponds and stuff are paid through from the growth. And so that's part of our growth plan that's coming. And just one more point, I'd like to make give you a breakdown of the 2.97%. We started with 1.49% for provincial downloading. With that cut to childcare, we're now at 1.22% for provincial downloading and 1.75% for the rest of the municipality. But actually, we're investing 2.25% into infrastructure. So it's actually a cut of 0.57%, or a savings of 0.57% for everything else. So if we can separate out infrastructure, it's 2.25, 1.22, that's for the provincial shift, and negative 0.50 for the rest of the municipality, including that assessment growth.
Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Finn.
Thank you, through the chair. Actually, Mr. Quinton's kind of was just touching base on the breakdown. I just wanted to see if it was possible. Councillor Solomon relayed some figures there. So that 2.25% in infrastructure, can you just, since we're talking about this, can you just give a total of how much actual money we are putting into the infrastructure that is extra? Because I completely understand the sentiment. It's just that it's really important. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a business or a driveway. When you're growing, it costs money, right? So I'm just curious to see the infrastructure expenditure.
I have that, Gord, if you like.
Go ahead, Thomas.
So the 1% equates to 1.5, right, million. The storm, we reduced to 300K, and then inflation was 1.6, so the total is 3.5 million approximately.
Just to add, Thomas, we're actually at about 4.3 million new for infrastructure, because we're adding 2.25% of new tax money, but we're also adding $775,000 of expired debt that we're shifting over to infrastructure. So it's actually a $4.26 million increase in spending on infrastructure.
Thank you very much. That was very important to note to the public.
And not to muddy the waters, but some significant investment in capital projects this year. Councillor Finn?
Both just answered my question.
Great. So seeing no more questions, I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 11-6.
Thank you. And just before we adjourn, I do want to thank everyone that worked on the budget, EMT, Gord, Steve, and their team. This was an efficient process. I know it was a challenging process this year. I want to thank the committee members for coming prepared and for having thoughtful conversations throughout the 3 nights. With that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn Budget Committee and move into Council. Moved by Councillor Harrigan, second by Councillor Pinsnow. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Did I not read something? Nope. Well, or who has the... Oh, I'll read it. Gord, can we just leave binders here? Yes.
Call the open session to order. Councillor B. McGregor, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'll move that as recommended to council by the Budget Committee, $2,260,000 of the projected 2019 surplus be transferred to the reserve for roadside assessment and allocated to the 2020 budget process to fund one-time municipal roadside drainage assessments. As recommended to council by the Budget Committee, the 2020 capital budget in the amount of $13.4 million be approved. As recommended to council by Budget Committee, the 2020 municipal budget resulting in a tax increase of 2.97% be approved.
Seconded by Councillor Latimer. Any questions? Just wanted to make one overall comment. When we look at, we get 2.97% increase this year. If there was no provincial download, and if we decided not to spend any more on infrastructure, we said that was enough, we would have cut taxes by 0.5%. So we have $4.5 billion of assets replacement value, and we're 50-something% funded on keeping those up to date. So it's very prudent in my mind, the 2.25% we're spending on capital. That is one of the biggest issues we have in our community. We hear roads and various things like that. So I'm very proud that the committee's come together and put together this budget and focused on the capital aspect of things, because to move forward, we need to have an infrastructure. So with that, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 12-5.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Well, this isn't quite right here, but I'd like to make a motion that Chatham-Kent Council hereby give public notice of the intention to, no, that's not what we want either. We're just going to adjourn to the February 10th meeting, and with the right to hold a closed session meeting should it be needed.
Councillor Wright?
Yes,
if
I hit the wrong side there.
Okay, do you want to second that?
Councillor Wright, you wanted it to be... Okay, so motion still passes 11-6, and we'll note that in the minutes. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a seconder to close the meeting? Councillor Finn, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.